Chapter 398. Jingxia said, "Let's go from here." She led the four into a dense forest. Lei Xingfeng said, "Isn't it better to go from the grass? It's hard to walk in the forest." Moreover, they didn't know what powerful beings were in the forest, especially under the cover of the huge trees. It was very difficult to find them immediately, which made it very dangerous. Jingxia said, "Follow me." Lei Xingfeng said helplessly, Okay, we'll follow you." Jingxia's walking speed was extremely fast. Although she was walking, but with a slight sway of her body, she was already a few dozen meters away. Luckily, Xian Feng's group of four wasn't too slow and could barely keep up. Jean Dia ran with all his might. She's too fast," Mad Eagle said with a smile. "Keep up, don't be left behind." After entering the dense forest, Jingxia's speed slowed down slightly. After all, there were too many trees in the way. Jingxia stood in front of a stone platform, under the cover of the trees. If one didn't already know that there was something here, it would be very difficult to find this stone platform. Lei Xingfeng saw the stone platform and couldn't help but be surprised. A Luan spot. There's also an ancient Luan passage here. Jingxia was obviously a little depressed. She said, "It's destroyed. What a pity, we still have to walk." Lei Xingfeng noticed that the Luan spot was broken. He said, "Can it be repaired?" Jingxia shook her head and said, "It's completely damaged, and it hasn't been maintained or used. The passageway is completely ruined and can't be used. Maybe there are still passageways in some places, but this place is completely ruined, and we can't use it." Lei Xingfeng, Jean Dia, Mad Eagle, and Tiger Love all had the same thought. The continent they were born in must have some kind of connection with the outer space. Both continents had ancient Luan passages and Luan spots, and the continent they were born in still had some ancient Luan passages that could be used. Jean Dia said, "Since it's ruined, what should we do?" Jingxia said, "Go back and walk through the grass." No one complained. Although it was a wasted trip, Jingxia had good intentions. They retreated and walked along the grassland again. For people, for gold-level puppet beasts, a crystal puppet, and a black bird perched on his shoulder. This strange team traveled swiftly on this ancient land. This land had not been inhabited by humans for too long. Once one left Karam's garden, one could see countless animals and plants. Among them, carnivorous beasts were common. There were also a large number of herbivores, as well as all sorts of strange venomous insects. There were all sorts of reptiles of various sizes. It was a feast for the eyes. Jean Dia lamented. If an ordinary person were to come in, there probably wouldn't be anything left of them. All four of them activated their defenses. Lei Xingfeng's body had a faint layer of lightning flashing around it. Any poisonous insects that came into contact with it, the small ones would immediately turn into green smoke, while the big ones would stiffen and die. His defense was the most tyrannical. As for the four venerated warriors, there were no poisonous insects that came into contact with them. The grassland was beside the forest, and there was a small river. From time to time, they would encounter small swamps. This place was very humid, and from time to time, it would drizzle. Unfortunately, there was no lightning. After a day, when it was time to rest, Lei Xingfeng brought everyone back to the Mirror Realm. Jingxia was full of praise for the Mirror Realm. She said, "No wonder everyone covets the Mirror Realm. It's really too convenient in the wild." After eating in the Mirror Realm, they rested for a night. The next morning, Lei Xingfeng brought everyone back to the original place and continued their journey. After passing through the river, the grassland, and the forest, Lei Xingfeng was not lonely. He held a star python record and carefully recorded the terrain. From time to time, he would mark his discoveries, especially the various glowing mineral deposits. His eyes were different from others, and he could see things that others could not. Along the way, he kept collecting all kinds of precious herbs, which were all transplanted into the mirror realm by Lei Xingfeng. There were people in charge of the plantation in the mirror realm, and it was up to Lei Xingfeng to collect them bit by bit from the outside world. This was prepared for Lei Xingyao. On this day, Lei Xingfeng and the others passed by a sparse forest. Jing Zia suddenly stopped and said, "There's someone here." They had been walking for about 10 days, and they had not even seen a shadow. Suddenly, someone said that there was someone here. Lei Xingfeng immediately became nervous. He knew that if there was someone here, it would definitely be a master, because he knew that many monarchs entered the secret door, and many of them did not return. They were either trapped here or died here. Lei Xingfeng said, "Where is it?" A simple and crude thatched hut was leaning against a big tree. Jean Daya asked, "There's no one here?" Lei Xingfeng said, "It was built by people." Jean Daya said, "What should we do?" "Go up and have a look." Lei Xingfeng thought for a moment and said, "No matter what, let's go and have a look. Since we can see it, it's fate." Jingxia did not stop him. She was also very curious. Lei Xingfeng took the lead and said, "Let's go, let's go." This sparse forest was not big, so they could see the thatched house on the edge of the forest in the distance. The group soon arrived at the thatched house. Lei Xingfeng said, "Is there anyone here?" There was silence. There was no sound at all. Jingxia said, "There's no one inside. I guess they've gone out." Lei Xingfeng walked to the thatched house and said, "Is there anyone here?" As he spoke, he walked to the door. He saw a piece of animal skin hanging on the simple door frame. He stretched out his hand to lift the curtain and walked in directly. There was nothing in the room except for a fire pit and some charcoal. It was a very simple fire pit with a few stones. There were also a few steel frames as thick as an arm, which had long been rusted. Lei Xingfeng said, "It seems to have been abandoned. No one has used it recently." There was a strong musty smell. Lei Xingfeng turned around and walked out. He couldn't stand the smell either. Lei Xingfeng said, "Let's go. No one has been here for a while." Jing Zia suddenly raised her head, her actions immediately attracting the attention of the crowd. They all raised their heads to look. Beside them was a tree with a diameter of 2 meters. Xian Feng also raised his head to look. Seeing something on the branches, he asked, "Is that a person?" Jingxia said, "It's a person wrapped in animal skin." Mad Eagle said, "I'll go up." Tiger Love said, "Be careful." Mad Eagle flew up and arrived at the branch in an instant. He shouted, "It's a person. He's dying." Lei Xingfeng said, "Bring him down." Mad Eagle flew down with the man in his arms. Jean Daya quickly took out a wooden bed. Mad Eagle put the man on the wooden bed. Only then did everyone take a closer look. The man was extremely thin, and his face was covered with a beard. Both his hair and beard were very long, almost covering his face. Jean Daya checked him and said, "He seems to be seriously injured. Tiger, get a bowl of fishman wine." They carefully fed him a bowl of fishman wine. Although most of the wine was spilled, there was still a small portion that went down his throat. After drinking the wine, the man clearly recovered from his near-death state. He snorted and slowly opened his eyes. As if the light was too dazzling, he reluctantly covered his eyes with his hand and mumbled something. However, no one understood what he said. Lei Xingfeng thought for a moment and said, "Feed him a bowl of meat soup." Jean Daya said, "I'll cook it." Lei Xingfeng didn't go back to the mirror world. As long as there were outsiders around, he would be very careful. Jean Daya took out the oil, wood to live. Mad Eagle and Tiger Love went to the forest to collect firewood. Lei Xingfeng took out the black bow he had used a long time ago. He had his eyes on a wild deer. Hunting to Xian Feng was an extremely simple matter. In just a few moments, he had already dragged a wild deer back. He shot an arrow through the deer's head and dragged it back with one hand. Finding a rope, he hung the wild deer on a tree branch and skinned it. The 4 venerable warriors were on guard around. They would not hesitate to kill any beast that tried to approach. Jing Zia looked curiously at the busy Lei Xingfeng and asked, "What are you doing?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Eating. What else can we do?" Jing Zia didn't have the concept of eating. She ate crystals, so she was very curious. She stood beside Lei Xingfeng and watched him skin the wild deer. Even if she was very strong, even if she was the top puppet in Karm's garden, she had never seen how to deal with prey. He skinned the deer and put it into the mirror world. Then he cut open the deer and threw away the internal organs. He didn't have time to deal with the internal organs. He only took the meat and bones. The meat was roasted, and the bones were chopped to make soup. After a set of procedures, the large wild deer was cut into pieces. Mad Eagle picked up the wooden basin with fresh meat and ran to the river to wash it. Jean Dia set up a large copper pot to boil water. When the water boiled, he put down the chopped bones and a part of the wild deer meat. Lei Xingfeng took out some dried vegetables and threw them into the pot. Jingxia watched with great interest. Although she couldn't eat, her curiosity was satisfied. Lei Xingfeng took out a steel grill and said with a smile, "This is a grill." Jingxia asked, "What is it for?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Barbecue, barbecue." Jingxia's eyes revealed a trace of envy. She had intelligence, but she wasn't human. Of course, she would reveal such emotions. The bone soup took a long time to boil, so Lei Xingfeng and the other 3 barbecued the meat first. The fragrance wafted out, and the person lying on the wooden bed began to moan and groan. No one knew what he was saying, but Lei Xingfeng and the others knew that this person had probably been hungry for a long time and couldn't hold on after smelling the fragrance. However, Lei Xingfeng and the others knew that this person wouldn't die for the time being, so they didn't care and only cared about barbecuing. They were all good at living in the wild, so they each barbecued the meat and ate it happily. Jingxia sat at the side, watching anxiously. Xian Feng had also prepared a plate of fresh meat for the black bird. After calling it, the black bird landed and ate the fresh meat, occasionally turning its head to look at Jingxia. Of course, even if it had the guts, it wouldn't dare to be cocky in front of Jingxia, as it knew how powerful this woman was. The fragrance of the barbecued meat and the bones were equally tempting. The man groaned even louder, but no one paid attention to him. Finally, they heard the man's hoarse cry, "Give me some." "I'm hungry," Jean Dia said. "It seems that someone is talking." Tiger Love said, "Someone is talking." Jean Dia said, "It's not us. It's that person." "What did he say?" It was no wonder that they couldn't hear him clearly. This person's voice was not only hoarse, but also unclear. Chapter 399. Mad Eagle ate the roasted wild deer meat in big mouthfuls and held the fishman wine in his hand. As he ate and drank, he said, "Who cares? Let's talk about it after we're full." Jingxia understood clearly and said, "That person woke up." Lei Xingfeng said, "Go and feed him a bowl of meat soup." Jingxia was suddenly interested. She excitedly filled a bowl of meat soup and went to the man. She reached out and held the back of his neck, saying, "Drink it." "Ow, it's burning me." The man, who seemed to be on the verge of death, suddenly jumped up from the wooden bed and shouted, "Wow, it's hot. It's burning me." "Wow." Lei Xingfeng and the others were stunned. Jingxia stood aside at a loss. She didn't know what was going on. Blackbird screamed and said, "Jie, a moving corpse." I'm scared to death. Jean Dia said, a bowl of soup can save a person. The man smacked his lips hard and suddenly stopped jumping. A white light flashed on his body, but it was obviously intermittent. Lei Xingfeng judged that the man's injury was quite serious. Then he saw the man walk to the barbecue rack, reach out and pick up a thin steel rod with big meat. He took a big bite, chewed quickly, and swallowed it with his eyes closed. He let out a long breath and said, "Salty." Then everyone watched the man's performance. He ate the roasted meat in big mouthfuls and chewed crazily. The meat was as big as an adult's fist. This guy chewed at most 2 or 3 times and swallowed it. He ate the meat very quickly. No one knew how long he had been hungry. Blackbird said, "Jie, this guy is so strange." After eating more than a dozen roasted wild deer meat skewers in one breath, the man stared at the meat soup in the big copper pot again. He picked up a wooden spoon, dug up a spoonful of vegetables, and began to eat. He stood in the big copper pot and ate and drank. The wooden spoon went back and forth, busy. The man's head was full of sweat, and drops of sweat slid down his eyebrows and beard. The blackbird asked curiously, he's not afraid of the heat anymore." Jean Dia said, "Idiot, he was in a coma just now and didn't know anything. Of course, he couldn't stand the high-temperature broth. That was just a stimulation. It didn't hurt him. You didn't see him. He's drinking bowl after bowl." The blackbird did not get angry and said, sure enough." No one stopped that person from eating, and no one went up to talk. They all looked at that person with strange expressions on their faces. Finally, that person rubbed his stomach and said in a hoarse voice, "It's not a waste to have a full meal before death. But I'm very curious. Since when can even enlightened beings come to this place? Is there any change?" Lei Xingfeng said, "Senior's injuries may not be without medicine, but Senior seems to have given up long ago." That person stretched out his hand to lift the hair covering his eyes, revealing 2 small eyes. He looked up and down at Lei Xingfeng and said, "I don't know which secret sect's disciple you are from. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. A perfected being, well, a 9th ring perfected being can take out medicine to treat a lord of heaven? Maybe you believe it, but I don't believe it." Lei Xingfeng did not talk nonsense. He directly took out a tube of medicine and shook it in front of that person. In an instant, it disappeared in front of that person. He was also afraid that that person would rob him. That person was suddenly stunned. Of course, he knew this medicine. Only a Tao Lord could refine it. He was dumbfounded. He doubted from the bottom of his heart that a perfected being had a medicine to treat a lord of heaven. Was this world too crazy, or was this medicine worthless? The blackbird laughed a few times unkindly. It liked to see such a scene the most. Jingzia watched curiously. She did not understand this. She was intelligent, but she had never lived in such a crowd. Fortunately, she was very smart. She did not speak when she did not understand. She just watched quietly and learned. That person's eyes were very small and a little turbid. At this moment, those eyes suddenly became big and flashed with excitement. No one wanted to die, especially him. He had been alone here for hundreds of years and had used up all the daily necessities he had brought out. He had not even eaten salt, let alone medicine. That person said, "Okay, you win. How can I get this medicine?" Robbery was not allowed, not to mention his injuries. Even if he was not injured, he was not confident that he could snatch the medicine. It was obvious that this medicine had been stored in the hidden Luan space. Even if he killed Lei Xingfeng, he would not be able to get it. Lei Xingfeng said very seriously, "This medicine is very precious. You should know very well that it requires a lot of precious materials and requires a Tao Lord level expert to refine it." He had to state the value first before bargaining. This was something he understood very well. No one would give away such a potion for free. Moreover, this person had lived in the starry skies for so many years, so he had a great deal of value to them. That person was obviously stimulated by the medicine. He said, "What are your conditions? Say it. As long as I think it's worth it, we'll trade." Lei Xingfeng pondered for a moment. He knew that he could ask for a sky-high price, but it would leave a hidden danger. After all, the other party was an expert at the same level as his ancestor. Once he turned hostile, he basically had no power to resist except to escape. Of course, using Jingxia to block him might be able to buy some time, but he was not sure about the final result. Without fighting, he did not know who was stronger. Lei Xingfeng said, "Have you been to the Magnetic Storm Mountain Range?" That person said, "Magnetic Storm Mountain Range? Well, you have the thunder attribute." Not bad. A single attribute is enough to advance to a perfected lord. Do you want to advance there? He was right. Lei Xingfeng was quite impressed. He said, "How do you know I want to advance?" The man sighed and said, "That's a big deal. As far as I know, the ancient thunder cultivators advanced in the Magnetic Storm Mountain Range. Well, there's also a forbidden area there. I can't break through it. It's all King Thunder beating people to death." This news made Lei Xingfeng's spirits rise. He said, "Don't you need to use the great stamp to advance to a perfected lord?" That person said indifferently, "People who are not confident and have ordinary aptitudes use it. You don't need it. Didn't you decide not to use it? Otherwise, why would you come here?" Lei Xingfeng had long planned to advance by himself. He had communicated with Elder Thunderstorm many times and had received a lot of advice and suggestions. Plus, there were some records of the Star Python record and sufficient materials. Most importantly, he had sacred crystals and the shifting brilliance medicine. These were the reasons why he was confident in advancing. He had to advance no matter what. Jean Dia said, "Are you familiar with the Magnetic Storm Mountain Range?" That person shook his head and said, "Not really, but I know where it is. I've been there before, but I didn't dare to go deep. Thunderstorm is constant there. I don't have the thunder attribute, so I can't go in, but I can take you there." Xianfeng hesitated for a while, but still passed the medicine to him. That person was a little surprised and said, "No conditions?" Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "Okay, take us to the Magnetic Storm Mountain Range. This is the exchange." That person took the medicine and said, "Then you'll lose out." Lei Xingfeng said, "It doesn't matter. You're a heavenly lord. You've recovered from your injuries with the medicine. If you go back on your words, I can't do anything. So I might as well sell you something good." That person laughed and said, "Smart guy." As he spoke, he drank the medicine and said, "Wait for me for 2 days. By the way, my name is Gao Yi." As he spoke, he went back to his thatched hut. Lei Xingfeng sat still. Jean Dia, Mad Eagle, and Tiger Love all looked at him. Jingxia said, "Aren't you afraid that he'll ignore you or kill you after he recovers from his injuries with the medicine?" Lei Xingfeng spread out his hands and said, "If that's the case, I'll accept it. Of course, if he wants to kill me, I can still resist to a certain extent. At least, you can help me." Jean Dia whispered, "Is there a problem?" Lei Xingfeng also whispered, "I don't know. I think he doesn't look like a crazy person. Let's take a gamble. We don't ask for much. He can easily do it." There had to be a reason to kill. Even if it was a lunatic, he would still subconsciously find a reason to kill. This person was not a lunatic. He was just an injured Lord of Heaven. The blackbird flew to Lei Xingfeng's shoulder and muttered, "He can't even eat in peace. Quack." Lei Xingfeng realized that he was a little reckless, but he still believed in his judgment. This person shouldn't be a big problem. After all, he didn't ask for anything from him. Moreover, he had saved his life. Most importantly, Gao Yi was familiar with this world. He believed that with his strength and knowledge, he could avoid more dangers. Because of Gao Ye's presence, Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to casually return to the mirror realm. Instead, he lived in the wilderness. Jean Dia set up a tent, and Jing Zia and the 4 gold-level puppets stood guard outside. 2 days later, Gao Yi walked out and said, "Do you have any clothes?" He had already used up all his daily necessities. Most of his clothes were made of animal skin. Jean Dia took out a few sets of clothes and handed them to him. Gao Yi said, "Wait for me for a moment." He walked to the river to wash up. Everyone waited in the distance. After about an hour, Gao Yi returned. This time, his appearance had changed greatly. He was a very energetic old man. Although his hair and beard were still very long, they were clean and refreshing. He smiled and said, "Although my injuries have healed, I can't change my appearance. Let me tell you, when I first advanced to the Lord of Heaven, I had the appearance of a very handsome young man. Unfortunately, after I was injured, I couldn't recover." Lei Xingfeng said, "You are very handsome now." Gao Yi immediately became happy. He said, "Of course." Everyone looked at each other. This old man was a little narcissistic. However, narcissism was better than arrogance. Lei Xingfeng said, "Shall we set off now?" Gao Yi nodded and said, "No problem." He appeared very calm and also showed his desire to interact with everyone. Everyone set off. Lei Xingfeng asked while walking, Old Master Gao, who injured you?" He originally wanted to call him Gao Yi, but the other party was an expert at the level of a grandmaster. It was too rude to call him that, so he just called him Old Master. Gao Yi didn't care. He said, "I won't say how I was injured, because I suppressed my injuries and used up all my medicine. After escaping here, my injuries worsened. I originally planned to wait for death here, but I didn't expect to meet you guys. I also didn't expect that you would have medicine that can be used by a Lord of Heaven. I can only say that my luck is extremely good. If I can't die like this old man will definitely advance to the Lord of Tao." Chapter 400. Lei Xingfeng said, "You're already a heaven monarch. Why don't you go back?" Gao Yi said, "I won't go back until I become a Tao monarch. This place is rich in resources, and I can find a lot of things. Why would I go back? There's nothing there, just a bunch of boring people fighting over a little bit of resources. They don't like each other. It's so boring." Gao Yi continued, "There's freedom here. Other than the lack of daily necessities, there's no one to talk to. Life here is very good." Jean Dia said, "Old man, you're very carefree." Gao Yi said, "Of course. There's no need to scheme here, as long as we can deal with the dangers. Life here is even better. When I first came here, I was just a true monarch. My strength was weak. Now, if I wasn't injured, I wouldn't have a problem becoming a Tao monarch." Lei Xingfeng and the others were shocked. This person was about to reach the peak of the heaven monarch realm. He was about the same strength as Wu Yang. That was scary. Gao Yi said proudly, "After this crisis, I'm very confident that I can become a Tao monarch. If I can't die, then I really won't die." Lei Xingfeng asked, "Isn't it very dangerous here?" Gao Yi said, "It's definitely dangerous here, but it's not everywhere. As long as I don't go to forbidden areas, don't provoke star beasts, and don't meet any lunatics, there's no danger to me." Mad Eagle said, "Old man, are there many star beasts here?" Gao Yi said, "Who said so? There are very few star beasts. If there were many star beasts here, there wouldn't be so many animals. You must be joking. Star beasts are perverted. There are very few of them, And star beasts have their own areas of activity. Adult star beasts have their own intelligence. They can also go to other continents. Lei Xingfeng realized that Gao Yi liked to talk. Perhaps it was because he hadn't talked to anyone for a long time, so he was very excited. He patiently answered all kinds of questions. Gradually, Gao Yi integrated into this small team. As far as he was concerned, because he stood at the peak of absolute strength, he appeared to be very relaxed. It could be seen that he was in an extremely good mood. In addition, Lei Xingfeng and the others could flatter him. He was also a somewhat narcissistic person, so this feeling was extremely good. Gao Yi said, "There are many types of forbidden areas here. The hardest to enter, and also the most dangerous, are the big forbidden areas. There are many things in there." The people of that era had a very strange trait. They liked to hide things underground, and they used secret doors to communicate. "Oh, right. It looks like you've been to quite a few forbidden areas." Lei Xingfeng asked curiously, "How did you know?" Gao Yi said, "The 4 gold-grade humanoid beasts should have been obtained from the forbidden area, right? This thing is not very interesting, and it's very dull. This crystal doll is not bad, but it's very difficult to subdue." "I didn't expect you to have one," Jingzia said angrily. "Hey, I'm not a crystal doll. I'm Jingzia." Of course, Gao Yi wouldn't argue with a crystal doll. He nodded and said, "Oh, so you're called Jingzia." Jingzia originally wanted to argue, but she didn't expect Gao Yi to have no interest in talking to her. He turned to Lei Xingfeng and said with a smile, "You can't beat her, right?" Lei Xingfeng's face was slightly red as he said, "Yes, I can't beat her. She's very powerful." Gao Yi said, "That's normal. This thing is extremely difficult to deal with. As long as the crystal in your body isn't exhausted, it's almost impossible to defeat them." Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Yes, if it wasn't for the fact that Jingzia's energy was exhausted, it would have been very difficult for me to obtain her." "Old man, are there many of these puppets in the big forbidden area?" Gao Yi said, "Very few. If you see them, it's best to stay away. Even I can't afford to provoke them. Their ability to dissolve attacks is too strong." Jean Dia said, "I don't understand why the people of these forbidden areas would give up on this place." Gao Yi said, "This is a mystery that no one knows the answer. Many experts have explored this before, but no one has an answer." Lei Xingfeng said, "Maybe we can ask Jingzia." Jingzia said straightforwardly, "I don't know." Gao Yi suddenly laughed and said, "Interesting, she actually doesn't know either." Jingzia said unhappily, "Why should I know?" The more she looked at Gao Yi, the more she disliked him. This old man was very annoying, different from Lei Xingfeng. She could feel Gao Ye's disdain for her. Gao Yi looked around and said, "Okay, we can fly at a low altitude. There are no forbidden areas in this area." Lei Xingfeng immediately waved his hand and put the 4 gold-level puppets into his hidden Luan space. He then asked, "Jingzia, can you keep up with us?" The corner of Jingzia's mouth twitched. She said, "Of course, you don't have to worry about me. Just fly. Well, don't fly too high. Fly close to the ground." Gao Yi flew about 2 meters above the ground and said, "Let's go." Everyone followed closely behind and flew out. Jingzia's body suddenly became transparent and then disappeared. No one knew how she hurried. Once one could fly, their speed was extraordinary. In this world, there were countless traps. Very few people who were not familiar with the road dared to fly. Those who dared to fly casually would have died long ago. After flying for 2 days, Gao Yi landed. He said, "Okay, come down from here, go around that mountain, and then fly again." Along the way, Gao Yi sighed. When he went to the magnetic storm mountain range, he didn't leave the coordinates of the secret door. Otherwise, it would have been easy to get there. Now, he had to rush over bit by bit. Along the way, Gao Yi even found an ancient Luan passage that was still passable, saving at least 10 days. When Lei Xingfeng saw the magnetic storm mountain range from afar, he was really excited to the extreme. His first impression was that it was magnificent and incomparably magnificent. Dark clouds shrouded the mountain range, and countless flashes of lightning streaked across the sky. The mountain range in the sky formed 3 layers. The first layer was the dark clouds, the second layer was the lightning, and the third layer was the mountain range. It was incomparably clear and distinct. Gao Yi said, "The magnetic storm mountain range is just ahead. That place is extremely abnormal. Even I don't dare to get too close." The rumbling of thunder could be faintly heard. It was continuous and sounded like the beating of a drum. It was urgent and shocking to the soul. Lei Xingfeng looked up at the sky. The sun was shining brightly, and the grass was lush. Herds of bison and elk were leisurely moving on the grass. From time to time, he could see wild beasts coming and going. It was a peaceful scenery. However, the magnetic storm mountain range in the distance gave people a completely different feeling. It was an extremely dangerous feeling, especially for cultivators. It was no wonder that Gao Yi didn't want to go there. Gao Yi said, "Little guy, our deal is over, right?" Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Yes, it's over. I see the magnetic storm mountain range." Gao Yi said, "How long will you stay here?" Lei Xingfeng said, "I don't know. Maybe a long time. Maybe only a few dozen days." Gao Yi nodded and said, "I'm leaving. I hope everything goes well for you." After he finished speaking, he turned and left without hesitation. In just a moment, he had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Jean Dia said, "That's a great bargain." Lei Xingfeng shook his head and said, "It's already very good. It saved us a lot of time." Jean Dia sighed. The value of that bottle of potion was extremely high. Lei Xingfeng had definitely suffered a great loss by exchanging it like this. However, Lei Xingfeng didn't think so. Although he had suffered a loss on the surface, he had established a relationship with Gao Yi. At least, Gao Yi had a good impression of him. When they met in the future, they would be acquaintances. Besides, Gao Yi was very powerful. No cultivator would dare to ignore such a person. Gao Yi could be considered a potential friend. This was also a kind of networking. As the saying went, getting acquainted with someone, not being an enemy. This was Lei Xingfeng's goal. Jing Zia said, "You're only saying this when he's gone." Hypocrite. Jean Dia was speechless. He found that this puppet was just like the blackbird. She didn't give him any face when she spoke. Lei Xingfeng said, "I've entered the magnetic storm mountain range. You guys go to the mirror world, right?" Mad Eagle said, "Okay, we can't help you much by staying by your side. It's better to go back to the mirror world. At least there are still many things to do." Jean Dia and Tiger Love nodded in agreement. There were many things to do in the mirror world. Ishan alone wasn't enough. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "Jing Zia can accompany me. The rest of you can go to the mirror world." As he spoke, he sent Jean Dia and the other 2, as well as the 4 gold-level puppets, into the mirror world. Lei Xingfeng said again, "Birdbeard, you can go too." The blackbird grabbed Lei Xingfeng's shoulder tightly and refused repeatedly. "No, I'm not going back. I'm going to the magnetic storm mountain range. I want to advance, just like you," Jing Zia said coldly. "Overconfident, ugly bird." The blackbird looked up at the sky and said, "I'm not going to give a damn about you." Jing Zia threatened, "Don't give me a chance. Otherwise, I'll twist your bird head off." The blackbird said, "I'm so scared. I'm not going to give a damn about you." Lei Xingfeng couldn't help but have a headache. He said, "Shut up. Then he ran towards the magnetic storm mountain range. Jingzia also ran, and the two of them ran in the direction of the magnetic storm mountain range. Along the way, Jingzia and the blackbird were still bickering. Lei Xingfeng stopped them twice, but it was still useless. He was too lazy to say anything more. Bickering wouldn't kill anyone, so let's fight. Jingzia said, unkindly, it's not easy to enter the magnetic storm mountain range. With your small body, you'll be struck to death by lightning. I believe that you'll become a dead bird. The blackbird cackled and said, Stupid woman, can't you see that this bird is of the thunder attribute? This bird plays with thunder every day, so it's fine. But you, stupid woman, be careful not to be struck to death by lightning. This bird won't collect your corpse. Quack! Jingzia was called a stupid woman, but she was not angry. She said, So what if it's of the thunder attribute? It'll still strike you to death. Lei Xingfeng quickened his pace with a headache. A puppet and a F** kingbird were not easy to deal with. After running for half a day, the sky was getting darker and darker. They could already see the dark clouds flashing with lightning above their heads, and the dark mountains gradually became taller. As they approached the magnetic storm mountain range, Lei Xingfeng became more and more excited. Jingzia and the blackbird also stopped bickering. Even if Jingzia was a puppet, she could feel the horror of the magnetic storm mountain range. Needless to say, the blackbird's body was trembling slightly. Nature's thunder and lightning had the most powerful deterrent force. That kind of terrifying pressure was incomparable to that of human beings. The magnetic storm mountain range was barren, and it was full of black boulders. When the thunder and lightning struck, countless sparks would fly. Those were the broken stones. When Lei Xingfeng arrived at the foot of the mountain and picked up a stone, he understood that this mountain range was actually a metal mountain. Because of being struck by thunder and lightning all year round, some of the ores had mutated, and there were materials that Lei Xingfeng needed. Chapter 401: Violent magnetic gold, brilliant copper, black porcelain, and so on. Of course, these were the names of the cultivation world. They were things that did not exist in his previous life. They were absolutely good things. Not only could lightning attribute cultivators use them, but metal attribute cultivators also needed them. They were all precious materials for machines. Standing at the foot of the mountain, Lei Xingfeng truly understood the terror of the magnetic storm mountain range. Bolts of lightning struck the mountain one after another. This mountain range was like a huge lightning rod. It was unknown how many lightning bolts were attracted. Within a kilometer of the magnetic storm mountain range, there were no longer any plants or creatures. Kacha! Boom! The sound of thunder suddenly rang out. A huge lightning bolt struck the mountain peak in front of Lei Xingfeng. If Lei Xingfeng was not a cultivator, his eyes would have been blinded by the dazzling light. Thunderstorm instantly shook people to the point of dizziness. Jingzia could not help but take a step back and said, If this kind of lightning strikes my body, I can't withstand it. The blackbird was also terrified. Although its mouth was fierce, it was not a stupid bird. If this kind of lightning struck it, there would not even be a piece of it left behind. It was 2F** king terrifying. Although Lei Xingfeng was also shocked to the point that his eyes were dazzled and his body swayed, he still noticed that in addition to the huge lightning bolt that struck the mountain peak, there were also countless small lightning bolts that scattered and struck down. These lightning bolts were what he needed. He said, I need to go to the bottom of the ravine. Even if there is lightning, it will be easy to withstand. For the time being, I can't go up the mountain, especially not to the top. This mountain peak, if you are not an almighty, you absolutely cannot go up. If you are not an almighty being, you will die. Seeing this kind of lightning, Jingzia also began to feel fear. If she did not have intelligence, such as the gold-level puppet beast, she would definitely not be afraid. If you ordered it to go up the mountain, it would definitely obey the order and not resist the mission for the sake of certain death. However, Jingxia was different. She had intelligence, so she was afraid. The blackbird was even more frightened. After all, it was still a living creature, and its body structure was completely different from Jingxia's. Therefore, it was even more afraid of the power of the big thunderbolt. It kept trembling. Another thunderbolt struck down. Amidst the booming sound, the blackbird was so scared that it kept trembling. You scared the bird to death. Too scary. You scared the bird to death. Why are you so scary? Lei Xingfeng was also afraid, but he was amused by the blackbird. He shook his head and said, "Bird, you should go back to the mirror realm." The blackbird's head was like a chick pecking at rice. He nodded repeatedly and said, "Send the bird over, quick, ga." Lei Xingfeng sent the blackbird into the mirror realm. He glanced at Jingxia and asked, "Are you going back too?" Jingxia said, "No, I won't go back." In fact, Lei Xingfeng didn't want Jingxia to go back either. If she went back, there would be no one to protect her. It was not a good choice to use a gold-level puppet beast because its whole body was made of metal. It would definitely attract lightning strikes. Lei Xingfeng said, "Well, let's find a way into the mountain." Jingxia said, "Master, have you noticed that the thunderbolts never fall outside? They are all concentrated in the mountain range." Lei Xingfeng said, "Don't call me master. Call me a phone like Uncle Kim and the others. You have wisdom, not strength, so I see you as a companion." Jingxia suddenly fell silent. After a while, she smiled and said, "Well, a phone, let's find a way into the mountain range." Her words were obviously not as stiff as before. They walked along the foot of the mountain. The mountain range was extremely long and endless. It was made of huge black stones. After walking for more than an hour, they still couldn't find a way into the mountain range. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, countless thunderbolts were still roaring, making them dizzy. Lei Xingfeng said, "No, let's go back to the mirror realm to rest. Otherwise, I can't stand it." The two returned to their home in the mirror realm. Jean Dupan was setting the table and serving the dishes. When he saw Lei Xingfeng appear, he couldn't help laughing. "A phone, sit down and wait for a while. It'll be ready soon." Who is this?" The blackbird suddenly said, "That's a stupid woman. A very, very fierce stupid woman. Fatty, this bird reminds you, be careful." Jingxia said, "Ugly bird, you're talking nonsense again." The blackbird flapped its wings and flew up, quickly landing on Lei Xingfeng's shoulder. This was the place that made it feel at ease. The blackbird cawed twice and wisely didn't continue to bicker. Jean Dupan asked, "How is it? Did you go in?" Lei Xingfeng smiled bitterly and said, "No, I didn't dare to climb the mountain. I wanted to find a valley to go in, but it's already dark, and I can't go any further. I came back to rest for the night and continue tomorrow." Jean Dupan asked curiously, "Is the magnetic storm mountain very powerful? Can you take me to see it?" The blackbird looked up and said, "Fatty, old Fatty, if you go there, you'll die very quickly. Well, I guess you won't even be able to stand there. You'll be scared to death. Fatty is not fun." Jean Dupan said with a smile, "Aren't you the same? You were scared back first." The blackbird suddenly fell silent. It was indeed scared back, and it couldn't refute this. Jingxia suddenly understood that the blackbird was not only mean to her, but also to others. Listening to the conversation between the blackbird and the fatty, she knew what kind of bird it was. Suddenly, she ignored the blackbird. The blackbird probably didn't know that this conversation had made Jingxia completely ignore it. Jean Dupan's culinary skills had improved. He was about the same as some of the top chefs in Lei Xingfeng's previous life. Especially in this life, there were countless ingredients that were developed by Jean Depan. Sometimes, Lei Xingfeng would even mention some dishes in his memory that were developed by Jean Depan. Therefore, when eating this dish, Lei Xingfeng's family was a group of people who were picky and unruly. Mad Eagle touched his belly and said, "You've gotten fat." Jing Zia said, "I'm going back to my room." She didn't like to be in a crowd, and she couldn't stand watching people eat. Even the puppets couldn't stand being hurt. She simply hid in her room. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Okay, we'll leave tomorrow morning." Jing Zia turned around and left. She could still hear the proud cawing of the blackbird. A group of people sat up. Lei Xingfeng found that his home was becoming more and more lively. Hong Chun and Yan were also present. Hong Chun was already a sixth ring sage, and Yan's progress was extremely fast, reaching fourth ring sage. Both of them were in charge of some people in the mirror world. They could be considered as practitioners in the management class and had considerable power. There were more than 10 people at the table eating in full swing. The blackbird also had a plate of fresh meat in front of it. It ate very happily, especially when it saw Jing Zia leave. Due to a habit formed when he was young, Lei Xingfeng would have a trace of gratitude every time he ate. The beginning of this life was a bit too difficult, causing him to have a considerable amount of resentment towards food. Hunger was a common occurrence. Now, as long as there was food, he would be quite excited. This was enjoyment. Eating large pieces of meat and drinking large mouthfuls of wine was a very happy feeling. Everyone chatted and laughed while eating in large mouthfuls. The blackbird quickly finished eating. It quickly flew back to Lei Xingfeng's shoulder and flatteringly combed Lei Xingfeng's hair. Lei Xingfeng knew that this fellow must have a request and said, "Say it, what is it?" The blackbird cawed twice and then said, "Uncle." Lei Xingfeng said, "If you have something to say it, don't flatter me." The blackbird cawed and then continued, "A small request." It stole a glance at Lei Xingfeng's expression and found that there was no change, and then said, "When we reach the place, let the bird out. Walk, caw, walk the bird." Lei Xingfeng had just drunk a mouthful of fishman wine when he spat it out. Walk the bird? This fellow didn't know that these words would make people collapse. Jean Depang looked innocently at Lei Xingfeng, his head and face full of fishman wine. After a while, he said, "A phone. I've washed my face. Thank you." Lei Xingfeng said, "Sorry, old fatty, I didn't mean it." Jean Depang said, "I know. It's all this damn bird's fault. I'll roast it and eat it." The blackbird was confused and said, "The bird didn't do anything. Don't wrongly accuse the bird." Jean Depang said, "If it weren't for you, would a foam spit out the wine?" The blackbird didn't care about anything except Lei Xingfeng. It said, "I don't even care about you." Jean Depang gnashed his teeth in anger, but he couldn't do anything about it. He got up and said, "I'll go wash up." Then he turned around and left. Lei Xingfeng said, "Besides walking the bird, do you have any other requests?" The blackbird continued to comb Qin Haodong's hair and said simply, "No, I don't ask for much." It was actually modest. This was not a big deal. As long as Lei Xingfeng could enter the magnetic storm mountain range, avoid the most violent thunder and lightning at the top of the mountain, and find thunder and lightning that could be tolerated, the blackbird could also fish in troubled waters. After all, it was also of the thunder attribute. Natural thunder and lightning were quite different from the thunder and lightning that Lei Xingfeng made, and it also wanted to try to absorb some of it. Lei Xingfeng said, "Okay, I agree." The blackbird immediately combed Lei Xingfeng's hair more vigorously with a fawning look, which made everyone laugh. The next morning, Lei Xingfeng and Jing Zia left the mirror realm and went to the foot of the magnetic storm mountain range again. listening to the rumbling explosions. Lei Xingfeng sighed with emotion. This is a paradise for practicing the thunder attribute. It's an absolute treasure land. I've been searching for so many years, but this is the only place I've found. Jing Zia said, That's because you don't know. I believe there are other places like this. Lei Xingfeng nodded in agreement. This world was completely different from his previous one. He didn't understand it at all, but it didn't prevent him from making use of it. They ran all the way along the foot of the mountain. Neither of them dared to fly. Even if there were no attacks from the forbidden area, the thunder and lightning in the sky were no laughing matter. Even Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to try such powerful thunder and lightning. The magnetic storm mountain range was continuous and undulating. The periphery was mostly cliffs and precipitous, but there was no gap to take advantage of. They ran all the way down for half a day. Lei Xingfeng was a little discouraged. What the hell? How can there be no way in? Jing Zia said, There will always be. For her, it didn't matter whether they found the way in or not. After running for more than an hour, Lei Xingfeng finally pointed to the front and said, Is that the gap? Chapter 402. Jing Zia said, It seems so. Let's hurry up. With a flash of her body, she had already appeared 100 meters in front of him before disappearing again. This time, she appeared a few hundred meters away. Xian Feng did not dare delay and immediately sprinted forward. Soon, Lei Xingfeng clearly saw a huge gap. When he came to the gap, Lei Xingfeng was stunned. This gap didn't seem to be formed naturally. It seemed to have been split open. The whole mountain range seemed to have been suddenly cut off, and the cut was very clear. Lei Xingfeng looked at it in a daze. After a long while, he said, What the hell? How is this possible? This mountain range was not an ordinary mountain range of stone and soil. It was almost a metal mountain range. It was too shocking that it had been cut off. Jing Zia was also a little stunned. She said, It should have been cut off by force. I don't know who did it, but it's very powerful. It's not strange. In our era, someone should have had such means. It's just that this is the first time I've seen it. It's really amazing. Lei Xingfeng said, It's fascinating. He was certain that neither the ancestral master nor the so-called Taoist lord could have such terrifying means. It was no wonder that the cultivators of the secret sects would go crazy over some leftovers in the forbidden area. He could not imagine how powerful the people of the forbidden area were. The straight passage was more than 100 meters wide. The ground was full of broken metal pieces of various colors. Moreover, there was no thunder and lightning on this path. All the thunder and lightning had been absorbed by the metal mountain above. Therefore, the two of them were very safe walking on this path. They didn't walk fast. Lei Xingfeng walked forward carefully and said, I don't know what's inside. It's not a forbidden area, is it? He began to let his imagination run wild. It was hard to blame him. Anyone who saw such a horrible scene would inevitably think a lot. Jing Zia couldn't tell, but she was sure of one thing. She said, It can't be a forbidden area. The thunder and lightning are too powerful. Any station has to set up a restriction, and any restriction won't work under this level of thunder and lightning. Lei Xingfeng admitted that Jing Zia was right. This was not a good place to build a forbidden area. The passage formed by the slash was about 1 kilometer long, which was about 1 kilometer long. The two of them quickly reached the end. The front end became narrower and narrower, and the top was a sharp point. It looked like it had been slashed open by a giant saber. However, how could there be such a giant saber in this world? Lei Xingfeng did not dare to imagine. Since there was no path, Lei Xingfeng asked, Did you find any other paths along the way? Jing Zia nodded and said, Yes, there is a crack. Everything else is very smooth. Lei Xingfeng said, "All right, let's go back." The two of them walked back. Soon, they found the crack that Jingxia was talking about. The crack was not big, and only one person could pass through. Jingxia understood it very well. She walked in first, and Lei Xingfeng followed her inside. The crack was rugged and difficult to pass through. Fortunately, the two of them were not ordinary people. They gradually went deeper into the mountain range. After walking for more than an hour, the two of them entered a canyon. This canyon was quite strange. It was small at the top and big at the bottom. Its cross-section was like a gourd. Looking up, there was a line of sky. Lightning flashed above, and the whole canyon was buzzing. The dark canyon was pierced by lightning from time to time, and the whole canyon reflected a misty blue brilliance. They continued to walk forward along the canyon. Soon, they saw the throbbing lightning in front of them. Lei Xingfeng knew that they were about to reach the exit. This canyon was quite long, and it was slanted upward. Due to the protection of the cliff, the lightning could not penetrate it. Lei Xingfeng said, "Why do I feel that this place is specially used by someone?" His tone was uncertain. The last part of the path was especially hard to traverse. It was filled with fist-sized pieces of metal, and the slope was getting bigger and bigger. At the cracks, one could see strong flashes of lightning, explosions, and continuous vibrations. Xian Feng forced himself to continue, even if the vibrations made him dizzy. Jingxia stopped and said, "I can't get too close. The energy consumption is increasing." Lei Xingfeng said, "Wait here. I'll go up and take a look." Suddenly, Lei Xingfeng said in surprise, "Huh? Stairs?" "Yes, stairs. Someone has cleaned this place." Hearing this, Jingxia quickly stepped forward. Sure enough, there were man-made traces on the slope. Stairs appeared in front of her. She said, "I wonder who did it." Lei Xingfeng walked up step by step. Soon, he reached the edge of the exit. At this time, he deeply realized how terrifying the lightning here was. Thick bolts of lightning struck down, causing sparks to fly in all directions. The dazzling light almost blinded his eyes. However, Lei Xingfeng knew that this lightning was far inferior to the lightning at the top of the mountain. Even so, it made him shudder with fear. Countless electric arcs jumped at the exit, one after another. The intervals were sometimes short and sometimes long. Lei Xingfeng waved his hand, indicating for Jingxia to step back. He was a cultivator of the lightning attribute and was naturally immune to lightning. Of course, if the lightning was too strong, he would not be able to quickly resolve it. He would also be injured, but it was much better than people with other attributes. Slowly approaching, Lei Xingfeng narrowed his eyes and looked carefully. Gradually, he could see clearly that he was already halfway up the cliff. There was a platform, and countless lightning bolts were striking the platform. He could see that the ground of the platform was glowing with a metallic light. The uneven ground had all kinds of metallic colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. There were all kinds of colors, and under the lightning strikes, it shone with a dazzling brilliance. It was very beautiful. After observing back and forth for a long time, Lei Xingfeng discovered a secret. At the other end of the platform, there was a doorway without a door. It was so dark that he could not see what was inside. Lei Xingfeng judged that it was definitely an entrance, but there was no door to block it. After thinking for a while, Lei Xingfeng stepped back and came to Jingxia. He said, "There is a doorway at the other end of the platform. I don't know what is inside." Jingxia asked, "Can we rush through it?" Lei Xingfeng said, "I haven't tried, so I don't know, but I think we can rush through it." Jingxia said, "I can't rush through it. I will stay on the platform." The consequences were very serious. The lightning would freeze her until all her energy was exhausted. The final result was self-evident. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "I will put you into the mirror world and let you out when we get through." Jingxia agreed. Lei Xingfeng put her away and went back to the exit of the platform to find a way to get through. He hit on the side of the exit. It was a world full of electric arcs. However, when they reached Lei Xingfeng, they were absorbed by him. The lightning striking the platform was not continuous, but intermittent, with intervals of about a few seconds to more than 30 seconds. When the lightning struck down continuously, it was extremely shocking, as if it was a drum, the sound of a thunderstorm. This rhythm wasn't much, but it wasn't little either. Xi and Feng carefully looked for the rhythm. Squinting and staring outside, Lei Xingfeng began to pay attention to the lightning striking down. He found a strange phenomenon. An extremely thick bolt of lightning suddenly split into dozens of thinner lightning bolts when it was over 10,000 meters away from the platform. When it was close to the cliff, it split again, and one of them landed on the metal platform in front of him. At first, Lei Xingfeng thought it was a coincidence. However, after observing for several minutes, Lei Xingfeng denied that it was a coincidence. In other words, the lightning striking the metal platform had been weakened in the air. Lei Xingfeng began to suspect that the whole magnetic storm mountain range had been cleaned up by someone. Due to Lei Xingfeng's position, he couldn't see the scene at the edge of the cliff. He could only hide behind the cracks of the platform and observe. He didn't dare to be careless. It was too easy to die here. If it was someone who didn't have the lightning attribute, even if he had the strength of a true monarch or heaven monarch, if he rushed into this thunderstorm, basically not even his bones would be left. He would definitely be blown to smithereens. Just the jumping electric arcs made Lei Xingfeng feel that he was on the verge of leveling up. He had a feeling that he couldn't hold it in anymore. After observing for a moment, he gradually made up his mind. He wanted to rush into the doorway at the other end of the platform. After calculating for a long time, Lei Xingfeng finally grasped an opportunity. He gathered his courage and rushed out, madly running towards the other end of the platform. The short distance of 20 meters made him feel incomparably far. He roared and ran. With Lei Xingfeng's speed and the activation time, 20 meters was at most 2 seconds. The moment he approached the doorway, a bolt of lightning struck down. Boom! Lei Xingfeng threw caution to the wind and rushed headfirst into the doorway. Countless tiny bolts of lightning struck him from behind. After rushing into the doorway, Lei Xingfeng continuously rolled on the ground a few times before turning over and sitting up. With the help of the piercing flashes, he could clearly see this small space. With just a glance, Lei Xingfeng knew that this space at the edge of the platform was artificially excavated. It was 10 meters long and 3 meters wide. This was a long room. The most peculiar thing was that in the middle of the room, there was a pool with a diameter of 1 meter. It wasn't water, but a silver liquid. Moreover, it was emitting a misty green brilliance. Lei Xingfeng felt a sense of familiarity, but he couldn't recall what it was at the moment. This liquid was extremely calm, like a layer of mercury. That round pool was 1 foot above the ground, and the liquid was at the same level as the ground. Lei Xingfeng took a few glances, and his attention was diverted. On the metal wall, Lei Xingfeng saw countless words and diagrams. He didn't know what was used to carve them. Lei Xingfeng walked in front of a wall. With just a glance, he was stunned. He didn't recognize these words. This was different from the words recorded in the Star Python record. When the Star Python record was recorded, one's thoughts had to be integrated into it. Therefore, the reader would be able to smoothly receive the information. Even if the reader didn't recognize the words recorded, they would still be able to understand the recorded content. However, the words carved on the wall didn't have this function. Lei Xingfeng naturally couldn't recognize them, let alone understand them. After being stunned for a moment, Lei Xingfeng suddenly laughed. He waved his hand and released Jingxia. He couldn't find anyone from that era, but he had Jingxia, a puppet with intelligence. She should be able to understand these words. Chapter 403. Jingxia came out and said, "You're here?" Lei Xingfeng nodded, with a smile. "Yes, I was too scared. It's not difficult to come here." Jingxia said, "It's easy for you, but difficult for me." She glanced at the round pool in the middle of the room and exclaimed in surprise, "Thunder liquid plasma! There's such a thing here." "Thunder liquid plasma?" Lei Xingfeng asked. "What's that?" Jingxia said, "You don't know? You're a cultivator of thunder. How can you not know about thunder liquid plasma?" Lei Xingfeng said bluntly, "I don't know." Then he explained, I come from a small place. The cultivators, there are different from those here. It's normal that I don't know about it. In fact, he had come into contact with it before, but he didn't know how important it was or how to use it. Jingxia said, "This is a precious treasure for cultivators of the thunder property. It's an omnipotent treasure. Any cultivator of the thunder property would want to have it. There are so many of them. I don't know how many years they have been accumulating, but they have formed so much that they are about to overflow. Let's not talk about other things this time. Just the thunder liquid plasma alone is enough to make you a big profit." Lei Xingfeng nodded. He was a little excited, but his attention was more focused on the words and pictures on the wall. He said, "What's recorded here? Translate it. I want to know." Jingxia looked at the wall carefully for a long time. Lei Xingfeng stared at her uneasily. This was too important for him. After a long while, Jingxia said, "This is a cultivation method of thunder." Lei Xingfeng jumped up excitedly and said with a smile, sure enough, it's great." Jingxia rolled her eyes and curled her lips in a very human way. She said, "It can't be translated." Lei Xingfeng's smile suddenly froze on his face. He said in disbelief, "What?" Jingxia didn't speak. Instead, she looked along the wall and said, "It's a fairly complete cultivation method. It's just an elementary one. Do you want it?" Lei Xingfeng was puzzled. "It can't be translated, can it?" Jingxia laughed lightly and said, "You're so stupid." In an instant, she had a flirtatious expression, causing Xian Feng to be dumbstruck. Xian Feng cursed in his heart. "Fuck, I'm being looked down upon by a mannequin. I'm being teased by a mannequin. Why ya?" Swallowing his saliva, Xian Feng spoke. "What do you mean?" Jingxia said, "Give me a record of the star python. Don't tell me you don't have it. I'll translate it for you." Xian Feng hurriedly took out a star python record and gave it to Jingxia. "For you?" He thought to himself, "What a smart fellow, although she's a puppet, her intelligence isn't inferior to a human's." Jingxia took the record of the star python and began to record the words and diagrams on the wall. Although she didn't know how to cultivate the lightning element, she could understand the words on the wall and integrate them into the record of the star python. This way, Lei Xingfeng could understand and learn from it. It was a very simple method, but it was absolutely effective. Soon, Jingxia finished recording. She handed the record of the star python to Lei Xingfeng and said, "This cultivation method should be the cultivation method of our era. It should be different from your cultivation method." Lei Xingfeng took the record of the star python and said, "Let me see what's different." This was an elementary lightning element cultivation method. It didn't mention the level. The cultivation method was similar to Lei Xingfeng's cultivation method. There were also things similar to Lei Yin's and weapon cultivation methods. However, this cultivation method was more refined and required more materials. For 3 consecutive days, Lei Xingfeng was completely immersed in the record of the star python. He didn't eat or sleep. He was completely focused. Jingxia didn't speak either. She stood quietly on the side and waited. Fortunately, she was a puppet and didn't have any human emotions. Of course, she already had a little bit of human emotions. It was just that it wasn't very obvious. Once there was an order, she would do her best to carry it out. Lei Xingfeng was thinking while checking the materials he had. He was pleasantly surprised to find that he had a large amount of materials. He had basically collected all the materials he needed in the record. There was no need to go out and look for them again. A small part of them was locally produced. To be precise, they were the mutated metals produced after lightning strikes. They were all over the place. He just needed to dig them up. 3 days later, Lei Xingfeng put down the record of the star python. He let out a long sigh and said, "This cultivation method is really too unique. Should I learn it or not?" Jingxia said, "Learn whichever is powerful and has the highest potential. What's there to hesitate about?" Lei Xingfeng said with a wry smile, "This is an elementary cultivation method. If I succeed, where will I find the intermediate and advanced cultivation methods?" Jingxia said irresponsibly, "Then you decide." Lei Xingfeng looked at Jingxia speechlessly. Jingxia said, "It's useless to look at me. I can't make a decision for you. I can only give you advice. What to do is still your business. It has nothing to do with me." Lei Xingfeng knew that Jingxia was right. He said, "You stay here. I'll go back and eat something. I'm too tired." This time, Jingxia didn't object. She simply said, "Okay." Then she walked to a corner far away from the door and sat down. She lowered her head and ignored everything around her. Lei Xingfeng quietly disappeared from the room. The house in the mirror realm was always lively. Jean, Daya, Mad Eagle, Tiger Love, Jean Depan, Ishannel, and the others were all sitting in the yard. When they saw Lei Xingfeng, Jean Depan immediately got up and said, 10 minutes, just 10 minutes. Then he ran to the backyard. He knew that Lei Xingfeng had come back for nothing more than food and sleep. Jean Daya asked with concern, "Afong, how was it?" Lei Xingfeng said with a smile, "I gained a lot, but there are also some problems that make me confused." Mad Eagle said with concern, "Tell us about it. Maybe we can help." The black bird flew down from the roof and landed on Lei Xingfeng's shoulder. It complained, "I've been waiting for 3 days. I'm so anxious." Lei Xingfeng said, "It's too dangerous. Wait for a while, and I'll take you there." The black bird said, "Okay, you're the master. You have the final say." It also knew that it couldn't argue. Tiger Love said, "Afong, tell us, what problem can't you solve?" Lei Xingfeng told them about the discovery of the thunder plasma and the practice records on the wall. He said, "I'm hesitating whether I should practice according to the records on the wall. If I practice according to the records, I'll break away from my current practice. Although my master can't teach me, he can only give me hints occasionally." The thunder attribute was quite rare, so once Lei Xingfeng became a monarch, he would have to find his own way forward. Jean Daya said decisively, "There's no need to hesitate. Just practice it, even if it's only the elementary level, which Thunder Attribute Cultivator can get the complete elementary cultivation method." Mad Eagle said, "Well, I also think that the things in the forbidden area should be very powerful." Tiger Love said simply, "Agreed." Ishannel also nodded. Almost everyone agreed that Lei Xingfeng should practice the cultivation method in the forbidden area. Lei Xingfeng finished his meal and went back to his room alone. He took out the star python record and studied it again. This kind of cultivation method was equivalent to overturning his previous path of cultivation. Of course, There were also similar things. According to this cultivation method, his previous practice was quite rough and needed to be completely adjusted. After calculating the steps of cultivation and the use of various materials, Lei Xingfeng finally made up his mind to practice the new cultivation method. After thinking about it, Lei Xingfeng fell asleep. He slept for 2 days to recover his energy. Lei Xingfeng returned to the cave in the magnetic storm mountain range. Jingxia was still sitting in the corner. When she saw Lei Xingfeng appear, she stood up and said, "The metal ores here are useful to me. Can I take some?" Lei Xingfeng asked curiously, "Useful? Of course, you don't have to tell me. Take them if you want. These are all ownerless items." Jingxia nodded and said, "Yes. However, I still have to trouble Master a Feng to help me get them. Most of the metals I need are at the edge of the platform. I can't go over." Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "This will take some time. I need to cultivate again. It will probably take some time." Jingxia sat down again and said, "Okay." She wasn't in a hurry. After having a large amount of energy reserves, she was quite at ease. Lei Xingfeng took out the star python record again. He wanted to compare the cultivation method recorded in the record with his own cultivation method. In this way, he could find some ideas for cultivation. In fact, the primary cultivation method recorded in the star python record was quite simple. Everything revolved around thunder plasma. This was the most important material and could be said to be the core of this cultivation method. Without thunder plasma, this cultivation method wouldn't work. In other words, if this cultivation method was spread out, even if the person who obtained it was a cultivator of thunder attribute without thunder plasma, he could only look at it and sigh. He wouldn't be able to cultivate it at all. Thunder plasma was the most important medium for cultivation. This was a step closer to Lei Xingfeng's original cultivation method. Lei Xingfeng didn't follow the official path of cultivation. Instead, he followed Elder Thunderstorm's method and directly obtained energy from nature's thunder and lightning. This method had certain benefits, but also many flaws. The most important thing was that even if one wanted to cultivate, they might not necessarily be able to find thunder and lightning. As for the other materials, Lei Xingfeng collected all the materials related to his advancement to monarch. In addition, his attribute was special, so the materials he needed were also quite special. They were very similar to the materials recorded in the star python record. In other words, most of the materials he collected could be used. A small portion could be obtained from the magnetic storm mountain range. In particular, all kinds of metals that had been tempered by thunder and lightning, as well as mutated metals, could be found here. As a result, not only did he not lack materials, he even had extra materials. Xian Feng didn't need to go out and search for them. The materials he had collected all these years were finally put to good use. Xian Feng was very happy about this. At least it proved that he didn't slack off. If he didn't find and trade for those materials, he would have been at a loss. Lei Xingfeng saw that there were a lot of metal materials in the crack before he came in. They were all splashed out by thunder and lightning when they hit the platform. They were as small as soybeans and as big as eggs. At that time, Lei Xingfeng didn't pick them up because he wanted to rush through the platform and enter the door. Now it was necessary for him to go back. Chapter 404. After crossing the platform once, Lei Xingfeng was already confident. He gave Jingxia a few instructions and looked for an opportunity to run across the platform again. Rolling and crawling into the crack, Lei Xingfeng muttered to himself, "Holy shit, this lightning is too strong. If I wasn't already familiar with lightning, I would have died on the platform." From the beginning, Lei Xingfeng knew that this platform was actually a training platform. Sooner or later, he would sit on it and received the baptism of lightning. Now, Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to receive the baptism on the platform because he couldn't digest the huge amount of lightning. In other words, he would explode alive because the lightning here didn't seem to stop at all. The interval of a few seconds to a few dozen seconds, when that happened, it would be difficult for him to escape even if he wanted to. He didn't know how this crack was formed. Someone had specially carved out a flight of steps. There were about a dozen steps, and the steps and both sides were filled with metal particles of different sizes. Most of them were splashed from the platform, and some of them were collapsed from the metal walls. Lei Xingfeng began to carefully select all kinds of metals. Many of them were metals that Lei Xingfeng had never seen or heard of before. The experience of his previous life was completely useless, so he could only rely on the records of the star python record to identify them. The metals were of different colors, colorful and brilliant. The one that was used the most was a golden metal. This thing wasn't copper or gold, but a type of mutated metal. Because of the memories of his previous life, Lei Xingfeng was puzzled for a while, but he quickly got rid of it. No matter what kind of metal it was, as long as it could be used, it was a good metal. This type of golden metal was relatively small and extremely heavy. It was buried under the piles of metal. Lei Xingfeng had to dig through the piles of metal and find it one by one. It was very time-consuming. Lei Xingfeng arranged a row of wooden boxes on the ground and placed the metal particles into them. They were all materials that he needed. The smallest amount was a purple metal, which was even harder to find. Fortunately, Lei Xingfeng's eyes could see different kinds of light, so if he found 10 pieces of golden metal, he could probably get 1 or 2 pieces of purple metal. Lei Xingfeng was the most patient when it came to finding materials. In order to make sure that the materials he collected were not enough for cultivation, Lei Xingfeng collected as many as he could. Furthermore, Jingzia also needed the metal materials here. What she needed was the gold and green metal. The metal pile that was a few meters tall was quickly reduced. Half of it was metals that Lei Xingfeng did not need, so they were all thrown to the side. These metals were all mixed metals. Lei Xingfeng believed that he could not separate and purify them, or rather, it would take a lot of time and energy to do so, so he directly gave up. Among the metals, the most precious were the metals that had been blasted away by lightning. Among them, there were very few that were absolutely precious. They were repeatedly mentioned in cultivation techniques and were extremely helpful in cultivation, relying on Lei Xingfeng's unparalleled eyes. These extremely precious metals were all collected without exception. This was a world of metals. There were all kinds of metals here. Lei Xingfeng did not understand why there were so many metals here. There were very few stones, and even if there were, they would be sandwiched between the metals. Lei Xingfeng guessed that this mountain range was probably all made of metal. Someone had laid down a terrifying restriction formation that formed endless lightning and was crazily refining it. He did not know who was so generous. Lei Xingfeng also felt that it was abnormally terrifying. This was a powerful being. The perfected lords, heaven lords, and Tao lords in the secret sects were so weak. He already had a vague idea in his heart. If this group of people had moved away, they would have gone to a place countless times better than here. Otherwise, they would definitely not have left this treasure land. Compared to his hometown, this place was like a bustling city, while his hometown was like a barren wasteland. It was no wonder that so many perfected lords, heavenly lords, and Tao lords would come here to search for treasures. This place was indeed extraordinary. Actually, there were many metal particles at the edge of the platform. They were better and of better quality than here. Unfortunately, he did not dare to stay on the platform, so he could not obtain these materials. After 10 days of work, He went to the mirror realm to rest, eat, and sleep when he was tired. When he woke up, he continued to collect materials. This time, he did not ask for help because he realized that in the eyes of outsiders, the metals here were all the same. It would take a lot of time to differentiate them. He was not in the mood to teach. Even though Lei Xingfeng had reached the 9th ring true body, he still felt exhausted after 10 days of work. It was mainly because of mental exhaustion and the aftereffects of high concentration. Sitting on a pile of metal, Lei Xingfeng was in a daze. During this period of time, he had collected a large amount of metal materials. It was already enough. However, he always liked to collect more, so he did not stop. Until today, he knew that it would be useless to collect more. He glanced around and sighed. Alas, there is no time to waste. There is still a lot. Well, next time, I will ask someone to come and empty it directly. Then, he slipped back from the platform. Lei Xingfeng said, I have collected them. He came to Jingxia's side and put down a wooden basin full of metal particles. There was no lack of precious materials. He said, They are all yours. How do you use them? He was curious. He had a set of cultivation programs and knew how to use metal materials. However, Jingxia was just a puppet. Why did she need so many precious metal materials? Jingxia grabbed a handful of metal particles expressionlessly. After checking them for a while, she opened her mouth and ate them. Just like eating fried beans, sounds of kacha-kacha could be heard. Xian Feng felt as if his teeth were about to fall out. This metal was very hard, yet Jingxia was able to chew it. How much strength did she have? After eating a handful, she ate another handful of metal particles. Lei Xingfeng just stared blankly. He only felt that his teeth were itching. Jingxia stopped and said vaguely, What are you looking at? Lei Xingfeng smiled bitterly and said, Is it delicious? Jingxia rolled her eyes in a very human-like way and said, How can it taste good? Lei Xingfeng said, Well, I don't think it will be delicious. Jingxia said, Nonsense! Of course it will be disgusting. It is hard and fishy. Lei Xingfeng was puzzled and asked, Then why are you eating it? Jingxia said, I want to upgrade. Of course I will eat it. Lei Xingfeng was secretly surprised. He said, Self-upgrade? Self-renewal? So powerful? Jingxia continued to eat. She nodded and said, Well, if there are enough materials, I can improve my strength and level. This plaything was simply heaven-defying. Xian Feng only felt that he had picked up a treasure. This plaything was much stronger than any silver or gold-ranked mannequin beast. Not only was it strong, it could even upgrade itself and renew itself. Lei Xingfeng silently took out another basin of metal particles and said, Is this enough? Jingxia said, Keep it with you first. I don't have a place to store it. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, If you want it, just tell me. Then he put away the wooden basin and said, I'm going to start cultivating. Help me guard it. Jingxia said, No problem. Just cultivate. I don't think anyone will come. Even if they do, they won't be able to cross the platform outside. Lei Xingfeng said with a smile, If someone powerful comes and can temporarily resist the thunder and lightning, you can guard the door. As long as you improve, you will be able to attack twice. Jingxia agreed and said, Well, I don't think anyone will be that stupid. Lei Xingfeng sat beside the round pool, which was filled with calm thunder plasma. The records on the wall had explained this thing very clearly, including what to use, what characteristics it had, how to use it, and how to collect it. This made it so that Lei Xingfeng didn't have to fumble around. First of all, Lei Xingfeng didn't have the tools in the records, so he had to make them himself. He already had the materials, and the method of making them was recorded on the wall. As for how to take out the thunder plasma, he needed special tools. Lei Xingfeng naturally had to make them himself. In fact, it wasn't difficult. Jade was enough. There were many small tricks here, and he even had to set up some simple restrictions. This was the first time Lei Xingfeng came into contact with restrictions. It was a very magical thing. Lei Xingfeng used thunder and lightning to refine things, but this time he couldn't use thunder and lightning. According to Lei Xingfeng's understanding, this thing should be an insulator, but it had to be inlaid with some metal. He didn't understand the principle, but it didn't prevent him from imitating it. After tossing and turning for half a day, Lei Xingfeng made the first tool. It was a spoon that looked like a cooking spoon. The front part was made of jade and was inlaid with a metal wire. This metal wire had a specific shape, and it took the most time to make. It had a long wooden handle. This was the first tool to fish out the thunder plasma. Lei Xingfeng muttered, "This is only the first tool, so troublesome." Holding the tool, Lei Xingfeng carefully probed the circular pool. When the spoon dipped into the silver liquid, it set off waves of fluctuations. Countless electric arcs suddenly burst out, surging on the silver surface of the thunder plasma. However, the movement wasn't big. As the spoon dipped deeper, the thunder plasma in the pool gradually calmed down. Lei Xingfeng only took out a little bit of the thunder plasma. This thing was very viscous, and the spoon only had about 3 to 4 drops. Holding the spoon, Lei Xingfeng looked around, wanting to see the power of the thunder plasma. The ground was made of metal, so Lei Xingfeng didn't dare to pour the thunder plasma on the ground. He had already seen that the thunder plasma pool wasn't made of metal, but a strange substance. For the time being, he still didn't know what it was. After thinking for a while, Lei Xingfeng first took out a wooden board and placed it on the ground. Then he took out a steel short spear and placed it on the wooden board. Only then did he carefully pour the thunder plasma onto the short spear. It was just 1 drop of thunder plasma. In an instant, a dazzling light flashed, causing Lei Xingfeng to squint his eyes. As if there were firecrackers exploding, the crackling sound continued to ring out. The entire steel short spear emitted a thick green smoke. Lei Xingfeng smelled a strong metallic smell. The jumping electric arcs flickered, and the crackling sound gradually stopped. A total of 2 drops of thunder plasma were dripped. After the electric arcs and flashes stopped, Lei Xingfeng was surprised to find that the short spear was only left with a thin spear. A large part of the wooden board was also charred, almost burned through. The short spear that was as thick as a duck egg had actually become as thick as a finger. However, it was shining with a silver light, and the metal structure had obviously been changed. Lei Xingfeng's scalp went numb. This was because in the cultivation method, there was a section on drinking thunder plasma. Of course, it had to be processed, and a lot of materials had to be added in before it was drunk. Chapter 405. Lei Xingfeng shuddered at the sight of the short spear's fate. If he drank it, he would probably be burned to death. Even if he didn't die, it would be too terrifying if he turned into a short spear and shrunk a few times. Jingzia walked over, still chewing on the metal in her mouth. She glanced at the pure steel short spear and curled her lips. Don't experiment. Thunder liquid plasma is extremely rare and precious. This thing is sold in drops. In our time, this was an extremely rare treasure. The annual production was extremely limited. This pool of thunder liquid plasma has been stored for who knows how many years. You're wasting it. Lei Xingfeng forced a smile. I just want to understand the nature of thunder liquid plasma. If I don't experiment, I won't feel anything. Jingzia said, just follow the records on the wall. This should be the place where the great forbidden area trains its disciples. Lei Xingfeng asked, Will there be a lot of people with the thunder attribute at that time? Jingzia shook her head. This place can not only be used by thunder attribute cultivators. People with other attributes can also use it. However, they should be at the high level. She didn't explain how to use it, and there was no need to explain. Lei Xingfeng simply wouldn't understand, looking at the few drops of thunder liquid plasma left in the spoon. Lei Xingfeng thought for a moment and poured it back. Since Jingzia said that this thing was extremely precious, Lei Xingfeng also didn't want to waste it. Looking at the pool of thunder liquid plasma, it seemed to be a lot, but Lei Xingfeng knew that it would be consumed very quickly. No one would feel that there was too much good stuff. In particular, thunder liquid plasma was extremely helpful to Lei Xingfeng. He was even more unwilling to waste it. Jingzia said, "This kind of cultivation method should be pretty good, so don't be afraid to drink it. As long as you handle it carefully, there won't be any big problems. Of course, if you don't handle it and just drink it, I reckon that you won't be much better than this short spear, or even worse." Lei Xingfeng said, "Who would randomly drink this stuff? I can tell that it's something powerful just by looking at it. I reckon that even poison can't compare to it." While eating the metal, Jingzia walked back to the corner and said, "Thunder liquid plasma is a good material for extracting metal. It's much better than spiritual fire. Let's try to collect more." Lei Xingfeng laughed bitterly. How many bottles would he need to refine? One must know that the thunder liquid plasma was stored in a special bottle. It was not something that could be stored in an ordinary bottle. It also needed a simple restriction made of metal to control the thunder liquid plasma. Creating such a bottle would require a lot of materials, and it would also take a lot of time and energy. However, Lei Xingfeng would not refine it for the time being. He planned to cultivate first, and after his cultivation improved, he would consider collecting the thunder liquid plasma. This thing was very important to him, and it was impossible to leave it here. Lei Xingfeng was very lucky that his Lei Yin could still be used. This was because his Lei Yin was refined according to the ancient method. Although it lacked a lot of things, it could be made up for by relying on the new cultivation method. If the Lei Yin cultivated according to the normal method, it would not be able to be used here. It would have to disperse and then condense again, which would take a lot of time and effort. Lei Xingfeng compared the difference between his own cultivation method and the cultivation method found here. He found that there were certain similarities between the two. It was just that the cultivation method found here was more refined, had more methods, and was more powerful after cultivation, especially the use of the thunder liquid plasma, which was used to the extreme. This was something that Lei Xingfeng needed to learn. At this step, Lei Xingfeng was extremely careful. He did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. If he made a mistake here, it would be difficult in the future. Refining a special bottle was very complicated, and it consumed a lot of Lei Xingfeng's energy. This was a relatively important tool. A lot of things required this bottle to refine. This bottle was not big, and was about the same size as a can from his previous life. It also had a simple restriction placed on it. The first step was to use 2 drops of thunder liquid plasma to melt and decompose a few types of metals and some plants. Lei Xingfeng did not understand the principle behind this, but he still did it. He was very careful with the concoction. This was not for eating, but for external use. After the concoction was completed, it was a bottle of golden liquid. If one looked carefully, they would see very fine electric arcs jumping on the golden liquid. They were very subtle. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to see them at all. Although Jingzia was a puppet, she was a puppet with intelligence. After so many years, no one knew what kind of mutation she had undergone. In any case, she was becoming more and more like a human. Humans were curious. Therefore, Jingxia also came to Lei Xingfeng's side. However, she was very smart. She did not make a sound and only silently watched Lei Xingfeng refine the bottle of golden liquid until it was completely refined. Jingxia said, "Did you succeed?" Lei Xingfeng observed for a full 3 minutes before saying, "There should be no mistake. All the characteristics match." Jingxia said, "Do we use it now?" Lei Xingfeng hesitated for a moment and said, "This is the first step. Okay, we should start cultivating now." This step was to rely on the golden liquid to cultivate. This was a process from the outside to the inside, and it needed the guidance of the golden liquid. After putting the bottle on the ground, Lei Xingfeng began to take off his clothes. He only had a pair of shorts on his body. This was the requirement of the cultivation method recorded on the wall. As for Jingxia, Lei Xingfeng directly ignored her. She was not a real person, but a puppet, although she was wearing a woman's skin. Jingxia also ignored her. She was interested in how Lei Xingfeng cultivated, not in his muscles. Lei Xingfeng took out a piece of wood and placed it on the ground. This was necessary. The ground was made of metal, and it would affect his cultivation. In fact, the best cushion should be made of jade. Unfortunately, Lei Xingfeng didn't have enough materials. He could use wood instead. He had a lot of wood. Back then, he had specially found a lot of special wood, many of which were for Lei Xingyao. Lei Xingyao had the wood attribute, so she needed all kinds of wood to assist her cultivation. After everything was ready, Lei Xingfeng sat down cross-legged. He slowly stretched out a finger and slowly approached the golden liquid in the bottle. Jingxia also became nervous. She stared at Lei Xingfeng's finger. When his finger approached the golden liquid, the liquid in the bottle seemed to be alive before it touched it. It began to boil, and extremely small electric arcs gradually gathered together to form a golden lightning bolt as thin as a toothpick. Lei Xingfeng's finger moved a little closer. When it was about 1 centimeter away, the electric arc hit his finger. In an instant, following the thin electric arc, the golden liquid in the bottle quickly dyed Lei Xingfeng's finger. Jingxia was shocked to see that the golden liquid in the jar seemed to be alive, climbing up along Xinfeng's fingers to his wrists, then to his elbows, and then to his elbows. Furthermore, it quickly spread, and everywhere it touched was dyed in a dazzling golden color. Lei Xingfeng was also surprised, and even a little shocked. This was too magical. He watched the golden liquid spread to the upper part of his body. A numbing feeling came. There was no pain, only numbness and itchiness. After about 10 minutes, the golden liquid in the bottle was used up, and all of it was transferred to Lei Xingfeng's body. He was now like an extra-large golden light bulb, shining with golden light. Gradually, the numbness and itchiness went deep into his skin. During this time, Lei Xingfeng couldn't do anything. He could only accept it passively. Lei Xingfeng could feel the yin force in his body circulating rapidly and combining with the golden liquid that had invaded his body. After about 2 hours, the golden light on Lei Xingfeng's body gradually weakened and then disappeared bit by bit. In the end, there was no trace of it at all. Lei Xingfeng stood up. He looked at his arm in confusion and found that his skin was still the same. There was no change. He said, "It doesn't seem to have any effect. What is this?" Jingxia threw a piece of metal into her mouth. It was about the size of a grape. With a crunch, she crushed it. She said, "I remember you need 3 bottles to have a clear effect. You only have 1 bottle. You're a little anxious." As she spoke, she ate the metal. Lei Xingfeng only felt a toothache. Of course, Lei Xingfeng knew. The main reason was that after using 1 bottle, there was no change at all. This made him a little confused. He said, "Okay, then let's do it again." Lei Xingfeng gradually became familiar with the process of reconfiguring. The speed of the reconfiguration was also much faster. This thing was relatively easy to configure and wasn't very precise. Basically, as long as it was within range, there wouldn't be any mistakes. In a short while, the second bottle of golden liquid was configured. Following the same pattern, Lei Xingfeng once again placed his finger on top of the golden liquid. In an instant, thin electric arcs struck his finger. Very quickly, Lei Xingfeng's body was once again dyed golden. After the second absorption, Lei Xingfeng vaguely felt a change in his body. However, he couldn't tell what the change was for the time being. The originally extremely rich yin force seemed to have decreased. However, after experiencing it for a while, he felt that it was pure. This was simply unimaginable before. It was like a bottle that was originally filled with water. No matter what, it couldn't be added. Not even a drop of water could be added. But now, the feeling was that the water in the bottle had become a viscous liquid. The volume was also much smaller, and it could be added again. Jingzia asked curiously, "Is there a change?" Lei Xingfeng shook his head first, then nodded. Jingzia was confused. "Is there a change or not? You're nodding and shaking your head. I don't know what you're trying to say." Lei Xingfeng suddenly smiled and said, "There should be a change, but I can't control this change." He stretched out his hand and gently grasped the ground. Suddenly, his entire palm turned golden. Fine electric arcs jumped on the surface of his skin. He gently and skillfully grasped the ground. In an instant, he grabbed a piece of metal. He felt as if he had grabbed a piece of tofu. Jingzia was stunned and said, "Amazing!" The ground here was extraordinarily hard. It was formed from metal ore. Even with a chisel, it wouldn't be easy to pry open the ground. Lei Xingfeng just grabbed a piece of metal with a light grasp, let alone Jingzia, who was stunned. Even Lei Xingfeng himself was a little scared. How hard was his hand? He had a deep feeling that he didn't use any strength. A trace of joy appeared on his face. Lei Xingfeng said, "This is probably the change." Chapter 406. Jingzia said, "Let's do it again. What will happen when you absorb this thing for the third time? I'm also very curious." Lei Xingfeng didn't have time to rest or eat. Fortunately, with his current strength and level, it was no problem for him to not eat or drink for several days and nights. Then, he began to mix the golden liquid again. This time, Lei Xingfeng was very proficient. With the experience of mixing it twice, he succeeded for the third time in a very short time. Once again, he stretched out his finger, and the golden electric arc hit his finger. In an instant, the golden liquid covered his entire body. This time, the speed was extremely fast. It only took a few seconds, unlike the first time when the golden liquid spread slowly throughout his body. Lei Xingfeng smiled and continued to sit and absorb passively. Lei Yin began to become restless. It suddenly left his body and hung above his head. Suddenly, a trace of golden light emerged from its body, instantly dyeing the silver Lei Yin golden. Jingzia took a step back and silently watched the changes. She knew in her heart that Lei Xingfeng would have a real change this time. Lei Xingfeng instantly entered an ethereal state. He completely lost his sense of the outside world, as if he had been locked in a small dark room. He couldn't hear or see anything, and his body couldn't feel anything. It was as if he had lost all his sensory organs. Only his mind was still there, but it was extremely slow. After what seemed like a long time, and also like a moment, Lei Xingfeng suddenly opened his eyes and said, "How long?" Jingzia said, 3 days. As soon as Lei Xingfeng's voice fell, his stomach sounded like a drum. He said a little embarrassedly, "I'm starving." At this moment, his limbs were sore and his whole body was weak. He said, "Jingzia, you stay here and guard. I'll go back and eat." Lei Xingfeng quickly put on his clothes and suddenly disappeared. A large group of people surrounded Lei Xingfeng. They saw this guy eating and drinking like crazy. He seemed to have returned to the time when he had just started cultivating. No matter how much he ate, it was not enough. Jean de Pan roasted a whole bull on a huge steel rack, slowly rotating it. From time to time, he brushed all kinds of seasonings and grease on it. From time to time, he would cut a large piece of roasted meat and put it on a wooden plate. The waiter would bring it to the table. Lei Xingfeng drank the fishman wine and ate the roasted meat in big mouthfuls. Jean Dia, Feng Ying, Shihu, Ai Shan, and the others were chatting with Xi and Feng at first, but then they just watched him eat. Even they were shocked by the amount of food he was eating. It was too much. A large plate of barbecued meat was finished in a few minutes. Up until now, he had already eaten 7 plates, and that wasn't counting the other food. Feng Ying shook his head. Did Feng not eat anything outside? Jean Dia said, probably. Maybe he didn't eat anything. That's why he's so hungry. It's rare to see a Feng eat so much. Xi and Feng's hunger was actually due to his training. The golden liquid had changed his body, but this change was gradual. He needed large amounts of food to replenish his body, and with his powerful digestive ability, almost any food that entered his stomach would be quickly digested, causing him to feel like he couldn't be full no matter how much he ate. Fortunately, the mirror world was a production base. As the number of species collected increased, the food here became more and more abundant. Whenever Lei Xingfeng came back, the black bird would immediately land on his shoulder. The black bird was also very depressed. During this time, it basically stayed on the roof of Lei Xingfeng's house. It was not its nest. It was used to nesting on Lei Xingfeng's shoulder, but this nest would not take it. The black bird also did not dare to disturb Lei Xingfeng when he was eating. It just tried to please Lei Xingfeng by combing his hair. For it, this was the best way to flatter him. After eating for 4 hours, Lei Xingfeng did not stop. The most terrifying thing was not the time, but that he had eaten more than half of the bowl. The bowl on the steel frame was only left with a skeleton. All the meat was eaten by Lei Xingfeng. Everyone was stunned. Lei Xingfeng looked calm. They did not see his stomach grow bigger. It was still the same. No one knew where all the meat went. Lei Xingfeng said, "Fatty, split the skeleton and boil it." Fatty Jean said, "There's soup. There's no need to cook it." Lei Xingfeng said, "Do you still have the duck oil sesame seed cake you made? Give me a basin." He did not even need to plate it. He just ordered a basin. Jean Dia said, "A phone. Don't eat until you're full." Lei Xingfeng smiled bitterly and said, "If only I could eat until I'm full. I feel like I'm not full yet." With a plop, a waiter sat down on the ground. He was shocked by Lei Xingfeng's appetite. It was too scary. Lei Xingfeng laughed awkwardly and said, "It's just this time. In the future, I won't be so hungry." Jean Dia smiled and said, "Okay, then eat. This martial art of yours is really strange. You have to eat a lot after cultivating it. This is the first time I've seen it." Tiger Love laughed and said, "It's a blessing to be able to eat." A large bowl of soup and a large bowl of duck oil sesame seed cakes had been prepared by Jean de Pang in advance. The soup had been simmering for an entire day. It was a very thick soup. As for what was inside, no one except Jean de Pang knew. The taste was absolutely delicious. Holding the sesame seed cake and the soup, Lei Xingfeng sighed and said, "It's my first time eating like this. It's so good." Ishanel waited until Lei Xingfeng was almost done eating before he began to report the operation of the mirror realm. Although he was in charge of the entire mirror realm, there were still some things that needed to be reported. Lei Xingfeng casually gave a few instructions and said, "You're in charge of these things. You don't need to report unless there's something special." Ishan agreed. Lei Xingfeng said, "The principle of the mirror realm is fairness. Of course, absolute fairness is impossible. We have to be relatively fair. There are rewards and punishments, and there are no other problems. Also, the next generation of cultivators needs to be taken care of. We still don't have enough cultivators, so we have to pay attention to the recruitment in the future." These were his master's orders. Ishan would of course carry them out seriously. There weren't many things to do at home. Lei Xingfeng only took a few minutes to settle them. This included the withdrawal of some materials, the distribution of yin rings, and the planning and construction of a few places. As for the small things, there was no need to disturb Lei Xingfeng. After finishing all this, Lei Xingfeng went back to his room to rest. He slept for another 2 days before returning energetically. Jingxia looked up and saw Lei Xingfeng appear. She said, "It's your fortune to have the mirror realm. You can rest at any time. It's very beneficial for your cultivation." There was no way to rest in this room. Just the continuous sound of thunder was enough to make people feel uneasy. It was very difficult to cultivate, let alone rest. Only a puppet like Jingxia could ignore the frightening sound of thunder. Jingxia said, "The next step is to refine your Lei Yin, right?" Lei Xingfeng said, "No, not to refine Lei Yin, but to strengthen Lei Yin. It requires a lot of structural changes and a lot of materials. Fortunately, I'm well prepared. Hee, I believe it won't be a big problem." Jingxia nodded and said, "Be careful. If you need any help, just let me know." She knew the cultivation process. After all, the cultivation method inscribed on the wall was changed by her. It could be said that Jingxia was Lei Xingfeng's lucky star. Ever since she had been with him, everything had been going smoothly. Moreover, with her help, he had obtained many precious crystals. Lei Xingfeng said, "Not yet. When I need you, I'll call you." There was no need to be polite. He immediately agreed. Lei Xingfeng had refined most of the metal materials and other materials he had obtained in the past. But now, it seemed that this level of refinement was too inferior. After seeing the purification effect of the thunder plasma, Lei Xingfeng knew that his previous methods were not good enough. Of course, Lei Xingfeng had to add his own strength to the thunder plasma as a means of purification. After being cleansed by the golden liquid, his body had already adapted to the thunder plasma. If his body had not been cleansed by the golden liquid, he would not have been able to touch the thunder plasma. If he had touched it by force, the only result would have been to turn into a charred corpse. Then, using thunder plasma to purify things would have been just empty talk. If one simply used thunder plasma to purify things without anyone controlling it, any purified things would eventually be annihilated by the thunder plasma. Lei Xingfeng took out the previously collected metals and placed them on the side. They were all basins of metal particles. First, he needed to purify some materials before he could repair Lei Yin. In the past, the procedures for purifying materials were complicated. There were various purification methods for various materials. Of course, the medium was Lei Xingfeng's lightning. But compared to the thunder plasma, this kind of lightning power was not at the same level. The difference between the two was huge. Lei Xingfeng scooped out a spoonful of thunder plasma with a spoon. This time, the amount was slightly larger. When he poured it into the jar, it could almost cover the bottom of the jar. The amount was about 100 drops. Jingxia could not help but say, "Do you need to be so extravagant?" Lei Xingfeng glanced at the round pool. Although he did not know how much thunder plasma was in this pool, the amount was definitely not small. He smiled and said, "It's enough for us to squander." Jingxia shook her head and did not speak. Even in their era, thunder plasma was an extraordinary treasure. She did not expect that someone would be so extravagant as to use it to purify materials. Lei Xingfeng said, "Help me throw the metal particles in." As he spoke, Lei Xingfeng stretched out a finger on each hand and slowly approached the jar. Two thin electric arcs jumped up and directly hit the fingers. At this moment, Lei Xingfeng drew out the thin electric arcs and said, "Now." Jingxia immediately picked up the metal particles and threw them onto the electric arcs. In an instant, the metal particles strangely froze in the air and began to roll under the attack of the two electric arcs. Lei Xingfeng said, "Keep throwing them." Metal particles were thrown in one after another. The big ones were as big as eggs, and the small ones were as small as soybeans. Of course, they were all made of the same material. Soon, a ball of molten metal the size of a basketball was suspended in front of them. It was fixed in the air by the two thin electric arcs. One could imagine the power of the electric arcs. Stimulated by the electric arcs, the ball of molten metal slowly rotated. Scorching green smoke continuously rose from the bottom of the ball. Lei Xingfeng did not use too much power. He only guided the thunder plasma in the jar and relied on this power to purify the metal. Chapter 407. Jingxia had good eyesight. When she saw that it was about time, she immediately stopped. This lump of liquid metal was about the size of a grapefruit. Basically, all the impurities had been completely removed. He took out a mold that he had prepared beforehand and controlled the electric arc to carefully pour the liquid metal into it. After a short while, it condensed into thumb-sized cubes that flickered with light and had an incomparably smooth surface. Lei Xingfeng was busy for 3 days before he finally finished purifying the metal. The amount of thunder liquid plasma used was almost enough to fill a jar. Seeing this, Jingxia's heart ached. This was too wasteful. Purifying the other materials did not consume as much thunder liquid plasma. In total, he only used a few hundred drops of thunder liquid plasma. After all, they had already been purified. It would be much easier to purify them again. After finishing the purification, Lei Xingfeng returned to the mirror realm to rest for 2 days before returning. This time, his mission was to repair Lei Yin. Lei Yin flew out. Lei Xingfeng stood up and had Lei Yin descend. Then, he guided Lei Yin to hover above the jar. When Lei Xingfeng commanded Lei Yin to approach the jar filled with thunder liquid plasma, a thin electric arc struck the jar. Lei Xingfeng felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body stiffened. He tried his best to calm down and carefully observed the changes in Lei Yin. Lei Xingfeng took out a tray made of thunder bones. This was the Thunder Beast bone tray that Xian Jiaoluan had helped him make in Hanya Castle. Several materials were placed on top of it in order. Lei Yin was originally made of bone. After so many years of cultivation and nurturing, the white bone had turned from white to silver. Later on, Lei Xingfeng also added a lot of materials to strengthen Lei Yin. This Lei Yin had expanded a lot. 9 orifices Lei Yin. 9 orifices. Lei Yin was originally made of red gold. Now, it seemed that the red gold was too low grade and could not withstand the powerful lightning baptism. When Lei Xingfeng used the golden liquid, he clearly felt that Lei Yin would not be able to withstand it. This was only the beginning, but it could not withstand it. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng had to cultivate again. Whether he was willing or not, he had to refine it again. Now that Lei Xingfeng had a better and stronger metal, he could replace the core of the 9 orifices. Lei Yin's overall structure did not change. The blueprint of Lei Yin that he had obtained before was very powerful. It was actually very similar to the one here. After carefully choosing the materials, Lei Xingfeng began the meticulous replacement work. This did not need to use his brain. It was a test of his physical ability. From the beginning, he was not very familiar with the process. After all, he had already made Lei Yin once. Once Lei Yin's primary body was completed, according to the records on the wall, Lei Yin could automatically devour materials. When Lei Yin had devoured enough materials and enough energy, Lei Yin could automatically upgrade. That was to say, the first step had to be done manually. After it became self-operating, Lei Xingfeng did not need to worry about the subsequent upgrades. He only needed to provide materials and energy. It was very advanced. Therefore, when Lei Yin's flickering silver light revealed a trace of gold, Lei Xingfeng finally breathed a sigh of relief. In this short period of time, he had consumed more than a dozen kinds of basic materials, most of which were produced here. Even the basic Lei Yin made from the bones of thunder beasts had its attributes changed. Traces of metal had seeped into it, changing the bones of thunder beasts, and improving the quality of Lei Yin. After letting out a long breath, Lei Xingfeng said, "It was very difficult. Fortunately, it went smoothly. There are some small flaws, but they will gradually be perfected in the future." Jingzia said, "This is a huge source of materials and energy. I don't know how many things it needs to devour to reach the peak." Lei Xingfeng shook his head and said, "I don't need to worry about that. I only need to be responsible for collecting materials and energy. Now, the best way to replenish energy is thunder plasma, which is much stronger than the crystals we have." Jingzia said, "This is incomparable. One is liquid thunder, while the other is energy storage crystals. The difference between the two is too big. Thunder plasma is something that can only be encountered by chance in our era." Lei Xingfeng said, "Hee, you didn't expect that there would be a pool here, right? Why didn't anyone collect it back then?" Jingzia said, "It's very simple. After they left, they gathered together again. Do you think that the thunder and lightning outside struck for nothing? When the thunder and lightning struck, a small part of its energy should have been converted into thunder plasma. If the thunder plasma here is still not collected by anyone, perhaps it will overflow after thousands of years. At that time, the whole room will probably be destroyed." Lei Xingfeng admitted this point. Thunder plasma was really too overbearing. If the amount was small, it wouldn't corrode metal, but if the amount was large enough, its characteristics would simply be able to melt everything. When using it, one absolutely had to be careful. However, there was no need to worry too much about using Lei Yin to absorb it. Lei Xingfeng wouldn't directly throw Lei Yin into the thunder plasma pool. That wasn't for charging, but for destroying Lei Yin. As long as Lei Yin was suspended above the pool of thunder plasma, Lei Yin would automatically absorb the thunder plasma until Lei Yin couldn't absorb it anymore. Then he would add materials, forming a cycle that would allow Lei Yin to grow on its own. Lei Xingfeng was going to do this experiment now. Jingzia was also very curious. Even in her era, thunder cultivators were extremely rare, and most of them were incomparably mysterious. They were strictly forbidden to provoke in the major forbidden areas. However, because thunder cultivators were extremely rare, even if they were incomparably powerful, they wouldn't pose a big threat. This was different from the thousands of thunder cultivators in the major forbidden areas. Even if they were top experts, it would still be very difficult for dozens of thunder cultivators to fight against the major forbidden areas. However, cultivators of the thunder element were extremely powerful. Once the people of the Forbidden Land left the protection of the Forbidden Land, they would be in great danger if they encountered cultivators of the thunder element. This was also the reason why people of the Forbidden Land rarely provoked cultivators of the thunder element. Lei Yin slowly suspended above the pool of thunder plasma and descended bit by bit. When he was about 1 foot above the pool's surface, Lei Yin hung there motionlessly. A 1-foot-long electric arc leaped up and instantly sank into Lei Yin's body. Because Lei Xingfeng and Lei Yin had already become one, he felt the same as Lei Yin. That enormous energy made his whole body tremble, and he couldn't help but tremble violently. He was only 1 meter away from Lei Yin. Jingzia saw a strange scene. Lei Xingfeng was standing beside the pool, and Lei Yin was suspended above the pool of thunder plasma. A 1-foot-long electric arc was connected to Lei Yin, and an enormous amount of energy was being continuously absorbed by Lei Yin. Then, countless fine electric arcs were emitted from Lei Yin, connecting with Lei Xingfeng's body. The sizzling sound even covered the sound of thunder outside. Lei Xingfeng's long hair began to stand up, and his head became incomparably huge. His body was trembling like a withered leaf in the wind, and he was really shivering. That fine electric arc was rapidly changing Lei Xingfeng's body. This was a strengthening process. Because of the golden liquid strengthening his body, Lei Xingfeng could withstand this degree of strengthening, let alone a cultivator. Even a thunder cultivator wouldn't be able to go through this first process. This kind of fine electric arc could directly melt a person. When the fine electric arc hit Lei Xingfeng's body, everything on Lei Xingfeng's body was turned to ashes, and his body was completely naked. Lei Xingfeng wasn't thin. If he had this kind of body in his previous life, he would probably wake up laughing in his dreams. This was a standard body type, and his muscles weren't exaggerated. They were very soft, but it could be seen that they contained explosive power, especially his six-pack abs. Of course, Lei Xingfeng didn't care about his body at all. He was shaking so hard that his head was dizzy, and it was very difficult for him to control his body. This was a passive strengthening process, and it wasn't something he could control. Jingzia looked at Lei Xingfeng in amusement. She knew that Lei Xingfeng was not in any danger. Lei Yin and Lei Xingfeng were almost one. As long as Lei Yin did not explode, Lei Xingfeng would not be injured. However, the way he was shaking was really funny. The most peculiar thing was that all the muscles in Lei Xingfeng's body were twitching nonstop. Of course, she did not have any feelings for Lei Xingfeng at all. She was a puppet, not a human, so she did not feel like a woman. Xianfeng saw the strange smile on the corner of Jingzia's mouth. He didn't know that it was because of his ugly shaking. He thought that she was laughing at his nakedness. He said, You laugh at what? What the fuck? Numb me to death. Jingzia immediately smiled and said, It tastes good, doesn't it? He, she said sarcastically. Lei Xingfeng said, Go away. Jingzia held her chin and gloated. She said, I can't leave. I have to be responsible for your safety. Lei Xingfeng said helplessly, Don't laugh. Jingzia immediately put on a straight face, showing an I'm not laughing expression. Xianfeng decided not to continue arguing with Jingzia. Now was not the time. His mind was almost completely blank. Even his words were spoken subconsciously without any thought. After shaking for a whole day, the empty Lei Yin was finally full of energy. There was almost no visible change in the entire thunder plasma pool. Lei Xingfeng estimated that he had used 100 drops of thunder plasma to fill up Lei Yin. It could be seen that Lei Yin was not strong enough. The moment Lei Yin was reabsorbed into his body, Jingzia couldn't help but take a step back. At this time, Lei Xingfeng was as majestic as a mountain. His momentum was incomparably tyrannical. Jingzia said, Quickly withdraw your power. Lei Xingfeng slowly sat down and tried to let his body adapt to Lei Yin. Gradually, the deterrent force began to disappear. Soon, Lei Xingfeng was completely recovered. He shook his head hard, patted his forehead with his hand, and said, "Amazing! It's incredible." When he had completely absorbed Lei Yin, he immediately knew that his strength had definitely improved by a large margin. He had just started practicing, and he had already achieved such results. Once he finished practicing the cultivation methods recorded on the wall, he didn't know how much his strength would increase. Once Lei Yin succeeded, Lei Xingfeng would have already won half of the battle because Lei Yin was the foundation. It was like building a house. Once the foundation was laid, it wouldn't be a big problem to build the house on top. Chapter 408. Lei Xingfeng was in high spirits, but he felt hungry again. This time, he brought Jingxia back to his home in the Mirror Realm. Although Lei Xingfeng had already retracted the power of Lei Yin, when he stood in front of Jin Daya and the others, the faintly discernible terrifying power still shocked them. Jin Daya said, "A Feng's surface is extremely smooth." Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, "How is that possible? It's just the beginning. I just finished cultivating Lei Yin and didn't have time to cultivate the rest. By the way, where's Fatty? I'm starving to death." Jin Daya and the others were speechless. As long as this guy came back, he would eat and drink like a hungry ghost. Mad Eagle said with concern, "You could have eaten there. Why did you have to come back to eat?" He knew that Lei Xingfeng usually brought a lot of food with him. He wouldn't let himself go hungry. Jingxia said he didn't have time to eat. Jin Daya shook his head. He knew that Lei Xingfeng had worked hard to cultivate. Soon Jin Depang came out with the food, followed by a group of people who worked in the kitchen. With so many people eating, Jin Depang couldn't handle it alone. Moreover, his task was to cook for Lei Xingfeng and the others. The others weren't his task, so a channel had gathered a group of subordinates for him. He could order them to do a lot of things, so it was much easier for him. There was a big bowl of braised pork, a big bowl of rice, a big bowl of fresh meat and salted meat, and a bowl of soup made from fresh bamboo shoots. There were a total of 3 dishes, including rice and soup, which were simple and affordable. The key was that Jin Depang didn't have time to cook, and Lei Xingfeng was so hungry that he didn't care. As long as he could feed Lei Xingfeng, it was fine. Lei Xingfeng didn't care. After all, with Jin Depang's skills, everything was delicious. When his skills reached a certain level, even braised wood wouldn't be bad. Lei Xingfeng didn't care about the others. He sat at the table and ate. His body was refreshed, and he needed a lot of food to strengthen himself. His digestive ability was now extremely strong. Any food that entered his stomach would be gone in a few minutes. His stomach moved quickly, digesting food crazily. No matter how much he ate, it would be digested. Lei Xingfeng had always liked this kind of enjoyment. Eating was Lei Xingfeng's greatest pleasure. He liked it even more than practicing. Lei Xingyao was the same. Both siblings were gluttons. The black bird landed on Lei Xingfeng's shoulder again. It was a little flustered and exasperated. "You didn't bring the bird again." "Sai, Grandpa, no matter what, you have to bring the bird. This place is suffocating the bird. It's so boring. Grandpa, say something." Lei Xingfeng said, "I didn't bring you because it's too dangerous. If you're not careful, you won't even have a trace left of you." The black bird wasn't scared. It said, "No, with you here, I'm not afraid." Jingxia said indifferently, "A phone won't bring you." The black bird said angrily, "Why?" The corner of Jingxia's mouth rose slightly. She said indifferently, "Because he doesn't even care about you." The black bird was furious. These words were its patent. When did this puppet learn them? It was too shameless. The bird didn't agree. It said angrily, "He doesn't even care about you. It's you, not the bird." As long as the black bird was mad, Jingzia felt happy. She said, "Well, he doesn't even care about you." The black bird choked and couldn't speak. No one would have thought that Jingzia would make the black bird suffer. Lei Xingfeng said with a smile, "Well, if you really want to go, I'll take you. But don't regret it." He scared it so that this bird wouldn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The black bird was suddenly in a dilemma. It knew that Lei Xingfeng was actually very protective of it. If he said it was dangerous, maybe it was really dangerous. It hesitated and said, "This, that. Well, I'll wait." It was still scared. Although it was lonely and boring in the mirror world, it was much better than dying. Although it was unwilling, the black bird was still afraid of death. Jingzia said disdainfully, "Afraid of death, bird." The black bird shouted, "Hey, Jie, don't think that I'm afraid of you. I don't like to quarrel with you. Jie, birds only fight with people, not puppets." Jingzia said, "Damn bird, you're so stubborn. Go away." Extreme disdain, especially the words "go to the side," used by Xianfeng when he was trembling. The black bird quacked and said, "I don't even care about you." Lei Xingfeng didn't care about the bickering between the bird and the puppet. He only cared about eating and drinking. Jean Depang always paid attention to the food. As long as Lei Xingfeng ate half of it, he would immediately send someone to fill the wooden basin. It felt like feeding a pig. After eating for more than an hour, Lei Xingfeng finally calmed down. His eating speed began to decrease significantly. He held a big bowl of fishman wine in his hand and drank half of it in one gulp. Then he said, "It's finally better. When you're hungry, you have enough food. This is happiness." Everyone had the urge to roll their eyes. With Lei Xingfeng's status, how could he lack food? It was as if he was hungry but couldn't find food. How could he be so miserable? In fact, no one knew that when Lei Xingfeng was a teenager, it was normal for him to be hungry, so it left a strong impression on him. At that time, his biggest expectation was to eat until he was full. At that time, he missed the life of his previous life. Even in the most difficult days of his previous life, he had never been hungry. There was only leftover food. Therefore, at the beginning of this life, he really wanted to cry but had no tears. He used to lie in bed hungry to avoid excessive consumption. This resentment remained until now. After cultivation, his digestive ability had been greatly improved, and he could eat more. Anyway, every time he ate, he felt grateful and happy. Jean Depang said, "Afeng, how long will we stay here?" Lei Xingfeng said, "We'll leave after I finish cultivating. I'll come here often in the future. It's an important place for me to cultivate." This was not only his place for cultivation. He also hoped to find Thunderstorm as soon as possible and bring Yi to this precious place for cultivation. Jean Depang nodded and said, "It doesn't matter how long we stay, but you can't be away from the hidden sect for too long." Lei Xingfeng said, "I know, but improving my strength is still the most important thing." Mad Eagle said, "Yes, if Afeng can advance to Monarch, there won't be any problems. Even if he returns to the Dawn Continent, he'll occupy an excellent position." Everyone understood what he meant. The Dawn Continent was the next home of the hidden sect. Since the hidden sect moved, their main place of struggle had changed. The Dawn Continent was the focus. As for why it was the focus, they didn't know. However, since the hidden sect moved, as a disciple, they had to work hard for the hidden sect. Strength was very important to contribute to the hidden sect. The contribution of a 9th ring sage to the hidden sect and the contribution of a monarch disciple to the hidden sect were two completely different concepts. After Lei Xingfeng finished eating, he immediately went back to his room to sleep. As his bodyguard, Jingzia followed Lei Xingfeng wherever he went. Therefore, she followed Lei Xingfeng into his room. Lei Xingfeng slept while she sat in the corner and waited. Even when Lei Xingfeng was sleeping, electric arcs jumped on the surface of his body. This was because he was still absorbing Lei Yin and integrating with Lei Yin. It would take some time for him to fully integrate with Lei Yin. At that time, his strength would increase by a lot. He slept for 8 days. When he woke up, Lei Xingfeng's body was weak. He hurriedly went to the bathroom and had a meal. Then, he took Jingzia back to the magnetic storm mountain range, towards this man-made room. Xi and Feng felt more and more familiar with it. Even if he could hear the deafening sound of thunder, he still felt that it was good. He let out Lei Yin and began to absorb all kinds of materials. Lei Xingfeng wasn't sure. According to the records of the cultivation method on the wall, if Lei Yin succeeded in the first step, he could use Lei Yin to absorb materials. Moreover, he could absorb them autonomously. That was to say, if you took out the materials, Lei Yin would find the materials needed to absorb them. It was a very magical function. In other words, Lei Yin had the ability to autonomously absorb materials, which was equivalent to having a certain level of intelligence. Ever since he met Jingzia, Lei Xingfeng didn't find this strange thing strange. However, he still wasn't sure because he had never tried it before. Red gold, 1,000-leaf silver, purple crystal, and other materials that he had collected before. There were also the materials that he had purified this time. He took out 10 materials at once and arranged them in a line in front of him. Lei Yin slowly moved a foot above the materials. Soon, a few electric arcs shot down and quickly rolled up a piece of purple crystal. Lei Xingfeng watched as the piece of purple crystal approached Lei Yin, and then quickly merged with Lei Yin. Lei Xingfeng hurriedly took out another piece of purple crystal. Lei Yin seemed to be very interested in purple crystals. He absorbed 3 pieces of purple crystal in one go, and then lost interest in purple crystal. Lei Yin then moved to the top of 1,000-leaf silver. 1,000-leaf silver was peeled off from rocks. Each piece was extremely thin. There were about 50 pieces of 1,000-leaf silver on the ground. The electric arcs quickly rolled up. As they approached Lei Yin, the 1,000-leaf silver quickly shrank. That was the result of the impurities being quickly removed. Lei Yin absorbed more than 30 pieces of 1,000-leaf silver and ignored them. Lei Xingfeng could clearly feel that Lei Yin's quality was increasing. He was secretly delighted. He patiently put away the materials that Lei Yin did not need and replaced them with other materials on the ground. Lei Yin absorbed them selectively. Some materials required a lot, while some only required a little. Lei Xingfeng took out all the materials and tested them. There were many materials that did not have any reaction to Lei Yin at all. In other words, Lei Yin did not need them at all. Jingzia, who had been observing from the side, said, "Metal materials absorb the most. I think let Lei Yin go to the crack and absorb above the pile of metal particles. I believe that there are many metal particles there that you did not collect." Lei Xingfeng nodded in agreement. When he first collected the metal particles, he had collected them according to their purity. He had basically given up on mixing a few types of metals because he did not know which one was more suitable. There were too many types, and he was at a loss. Letting Lei Yin choose by himself was the wisest choice. When the materials in the hidden Luan space were basically tested, Lei Xingfeng put away Lei Yin. He felt that Lei Yin was just a little bit away from leveling up. The so-called leveling up was an increase in quality. He said, "I will go to the crack." Chapter 409. To get to the crack, one had to pass through the platform. This distance was quite dangerous. However, Lei Xingfeng had already gone back and forth 3 times, so he had the experience of passing. This time, He rushed over the platform calmly and entered the crack, looking at the metal particles all over the ground, many of which were mixed with several kinds of metal particles. Lei Xingfeng released Lei Yin and let it choose to absorb them. When Lei Yin appeared above the pile of metal particles, an amazing scene appeared. Countless electric arcs flashed and pierced directly into the pile of metal particles. Suddenly, more than a dozen kinds of metal particles floated up and quickly approached Lei Yin, then directly merged with it. Lei Xingfeng silently memorized. As long as Lei Yin needed metal particles, he would record them down. When Lei Yin finished absorbing them, he would continue to collect them. Who knew if Lei Yin would need them in the future? He had to prepare in advance to be prepared. At first, Lei Xingfeng could still remember that Lei Yin had collected the metal particles. Later, he was completely confused. Lei Yin had collected a large amount of mixed metal particles. This made Lei Xingfeng unable to remember at all. Later, Lei Xingfeng gave up. He had no choice but to give up. Lei Xingfeng no longer controlled Lei Yin's position and let it move freely in the crack. He just needed to keep up with it. As the energy stored in Lei Yin was rapidly depleted, Lei Xingfeng knew that he had to return to the room at the other end of the platform and continue to absorb the thunder liquid plasma. Although it was a little troublesome, Lei Xingfeng was very patient. When Lei Yin's energy was mostly depleted, Lei Yin automatically returned to the top of Lei Xingfeng's head and instantly disappeared into Lei Xingfeng's body. He immediately returned to the entrance of the crack on the platform, saw the opportunity, and ran over like lightning. Jingzia watched Lei Xingfeng jump in from the door and said, "How is it? How is the effect?" Lei Xingfeng said, "The effect is very good, but Lei Yin needs to accumulate some strength. He ate too much." Jingzia laughed. She had begun to understand the meaning of a foodie. She didn't expect that Lei Xingfeng was a foodie. Even her Lei Yin was a foodie. Arriving at the pool, Lei Xingfeng didn't even give any orders as Lei Yin flew out by himself. After hovering above the pool, he began to absorb the plasma crazily. Clearly, it was different from the last time. Last time, both Lei Xingfeng and Lei Yin were trembling with fear. However, this time, Lei Yin was clearly familiar with the lightning plasma. Furthermore, he returned the fine electric arcs back to Lei Xingfeng's body. This time, Lei Xingfeng felt much more comfortable. He felt as if he was walking in a spring drizzle. That kind of endless moisture penetrated into the bottom of his heart. This time, Lei Yin absorbed the energy at an extremely fast speed. In a very short time, he was filled with energy. Then, he suddenly retracted it back into Lei Xingfeng's body. Lei Xingfeng stood there quietly for a full 10 minutes. Then he sighed with emotion. "It's too comfortable. It's completely different from the previous times. I like this kind of cultivation." Jingzia didn't say anything. She slowly retreated to the corner. She knew that Lei Xingfeng still wanted to go to the other side of the platform. Entering the fissure again, Lei Yin flew out spontaneously and began to absorb the metal particles. Gradually, Lei Xingfeng discovered something strange. He had a vague feeling in his mind that he knew what materials Lei Yin needed. However, it was still a bit vague. He had to work hard to focus on Lei Yin to get some information. At this time, Lei Yin flew deeper into the fissure. Lei Xingfeng followed closely. He didn't dare to control Lei Yin. He still couldn't understand what Lei Yin needed. He could only let Lei Yin choose for himself. Lei Xingfeng felt like a little bee, flying back and forth, working hard to grow stronger. He had a vague feeling that once Lei Yin advanced, he would advance as well. He wouldn't have to make a big fuss like Feng Chenzong. It would just be a matter of time, because the metal particles on the ground couldn't satisfy him. Lei Xingfeng began to attack the metal on the wall. Arcs of electricity hit the metal wall. Because the metal here was struck by lightning all year round, it was unknown what it contained. It would be difficult to break through this kind of metal cliff with normal methods. However, Lei Yin's golden electricity could easily break through it, quickly forming a large hole. In just a few hours, the metal cliff was full of holes as if a dog had gnawed on it. This time, Lei Yin was finally full. When Lei Yin entered Lei Xingfeng's body, Lei Xingfeng instantly understood what materials Lei Yin needed. He was surprised to find that Lei Yin was about to finish his automatic advancement. He was still missing one material. It was thousand-leaf silver. After communicating with Lei Yin, he immediately understood what was going on. He couldn't help but be surprised and happy. In total, he needed more than 3,000 pieces of thousand-leaf silver. Lei Yin could form his own defense system, and thousand-leaf silver was the most important material. Back in Hanya Castle, Lei Xingfeng had obtained a large amount of thousand-leaf silver. However, he didn't have the ability to use it himself, so he kept it in his hidden Luan space. Even he had almost forgotten about it. He didn't expect it to come in handy here. Thousand-leaf silver. Thousand-leaf silver. How difficult was it to extract thousand-leaf silver back then? Lei Xingfeng felt lucky. If he and Lei Xingyao weren't greedy for money, he wouldn't have collected so much thousand-leaf silver. Returning to the room on the other side of the platform, Lei Xingfeng laughed foolishly. With enough thousand-leaf silver, he was satisfied. He couldn't help but be happy. Jingzia asked curiously, "What are you laughing about? Did you find a treasure?" Lei Xingfeng immediately stopped laughing. He didn't want to be looked down upon by a puppet. He said, "Almost done." Jingzia said, "No wonder." She turned around and returned to the corner. This time, she didn't sit down. Instead, she squatted there. Lei Xingfeng's eyebrows twitched. This image was a bit problematic. It was a bit like the style of an old lady squatting by the wall and sunbathing in the countryside in his previous life. Lei Xingfeng didn't have time to say anything. He immediately took out the box containing thousand-leaf silver. In the beginning, there were 50 pieces of thousand-leaf silver in a box, so there were many boxes. He took out a row of boxes and opened the lids. Lei Yin flew out and began to absorb the thousand-leaf silver. This time, the speed was extremely fast. Pieces of thousand-leaf silver flew up and merged into Lei Yin's body. More than 3,000 pieces of thousand-leaf silver were completely absorbed in 2 hours. It was very difficult to collect thousand-leaf silver. It was extremely fragile and would shatter if one wasn't careful. One needed to be very careful and patient to collect a complete piece of thousand-leaf silver. Lei Xingfeng observed carefully. A piece of thousand-leaf silver was quickly shrinking under the extraction of the golden electric arc. It densely gathered on the surface of Lei Yin's body, wrapping around Lei Yin like an armor. More than 3,000 pieces of thousand-leaf silver were just enough to completely wrap around Lei Yin. Then, various substances seeped out of Lei Yin's body and quickly spread out. The thousand-leaf silver was quickly dyed a faint gold color. Dense overlapping dots appeared on Lei Yin's body. Fortunately, the color was bright gold. Otherwise, people with trypophobia would probably tremble when they saw it. Lei Xingfeng tried to drive it. In an instant, countless phantoms of thousand-leaf silver spread out from Lei Yin's body, forming a shield that protected Lei Yin and Lei Xingfeng. The phantoms of thousand-leaf silver were layered. These phantoms weren't static, but were rapidly rotating. Lei Xingfeng thought for a moment and shouted, "Jingzia, come and attack." He wanted to test the strength of the defense. Jingzia instantly appeared in front of Lei Xingfeng and said, "Are you sure?" Lei Xingfeng said, "I'm sure. However, don't use your full strength yet." Increase the strength of your attack bit by bit. Jingxia suddenly waved her hand and punched the shield formed by the phantoms of thousand-leaf silver. Boom! Jingxia's fist was only an inch away from the shield when it was blocked by a powerful force. Lei Xingfeng frowned and said, "Use more strength." Boom! An extremely powerful force blasted the shield. Suddenly, Lei Yin flickered with a dazzling light. Countless electric arcs surged out, and the phantoms of thousand-leaf silver suddenly flickered. Each of the phantoms of thousand-leaf silver was suffused with a golden light, dispersing the power of the attack. Lei Xingfeng only felt his whole body shake, and the power dissipated. He couldn't help but shout, "Good! Attack with all your strength." Jingxia was a little hesitant. She said, "Really?" Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Yes, with all my strength." At this moment, he was bursting with confidence. Jingxia's idea was very simple. Since her master asked her to use all her strength, then she would use all her strength. In an instant, her whole body flashed with light, and then her arm shone brightly. With a crisp shout, she punched Lei Xingfeng's shield. Boom! Lei Xingfeng couldn't stand at all. The power was too great. He kept retreating, and the whole shield was flattened. He was forced to drive Lei Yin crazily to barely resist. Jingxia couldn't help but cheer. So strong. Good. Lei Xingfeng's expression changed. This punch had almost made the shield collapse. Only now did Lei Xingfeng understand how lucky he was when he subdued Jingxia. Once this puppet had enough energy, its attack power was simply terrifying. The puppet's attacks were mainly physical attacks, and there were very few energy attacks. Of course, when Jingxia punched out, other than physical attacks, it also contained energy attacks. It was just that she couldn't attack from a distance. If she wanted to attack from a distance, she would have to rely on external objects. However, this kind of attack allowed Lei Xingfeng to see how powerful Jingxia was. Soon, Lei Xingfeng discovered that a few pieces of Lei Yin's thousand-leaf silver were damaged. This made him very surprised. One must know that after refining the thousand-leaf silver, it was already attached to Lei Yin's body. Through the stimulation of energy, it would appear on the shield as a projection. For Jingxia to be able to damage the real thousand-leaf silver, the power of this punch was very terrifying. Taking out a few pieces of thousand-leaf silver, Lei Yin would naturally absorb them. The damaged pieces were quickly discarded. Jingxia said, "As long as you have enough thousand-leaf silver, it will be very difficult for others to attack your body. This thing is not bad." Lei Xingfeng understood that he didn't have much thousand-leaf silver in his storage, but it was enough for now. He considered going to Hanya Castle again in the future. However, when he thought of the extremely cold climate of Hanya Castle, he couldn't help but shiver. The weather there was enough to kill. Lei Yin once again moved above the pool and absorbed the energy of the lightning plasma. After withstanding such a heavy attack, Lei Yin had consumed a lot of energy. Chapter 4:10. Lei Xingfeng was thinking about how to take away this pool of thunder liquid plasma. This thing was really too precious, and it was incomparably important to him. Lei Xingfeng still needed to spend a lot of effort to refine a bottle to store the thunder liquid plasma. Of course, he was not in a hurry now. His cultivation had just begun. With Lei Yin's successful repair, he could already directly absorb a little bit of the thunder liquid plasma. This was for the next step of his cultivation, which was the most important step to go to the platform to receive the baptism of thunder and lightning. Absorbing the thunder liquid plasma was very simple. It was done through Lei Yin. The purpose of absorbing the thunder liquid plasma was also very simple. It was to train the body's ability to tolerate thunder and lightning, and also to greatly increase the strength of the body. Of course, all of this had prerequisites. Fortunately, Lei Xingfeng met all of these prerequisites. First of all, Lei Xingfeng was a thunder attribute cultivator. Secondly, his cultivation was through the use of natural thunder and lightning to increase his strength. This time, after going through 3 rounds of refining his body with the golden liquid, his strength had increased by a large margin. Finally, he was strengthened by Lei Yin. This was completely in line with the requirements of the cultivation method recorded on the wall. All of this seemed very simple, but if any one of these conditions was missing, Lei Xingfeng would not be able to proceed to the next step of his cultivation. Lei Yin finished absorbing the thunder liquid plasma and was about to fly back to Lei Xingfeng's body. However, this time, Lei Xingfeng's thoughts were instilled into Lei Yin, making Lei Yin hover above the pool. He sat cross-legged on the wooden board and immediately ordered Lei Yin to absorb the thunder liquid plasma and then transfer it to his body. Jingzia sat on the side and waited. At this time, she could not interfere, so she could only watch silently. After about a few hours, Lei Xingfeng understood that he had reached his limit. Only then did he absorb Lei Yin into his body. The moment Lei Yin entered his body, Lei Xingfeng's strength began to increase crazily. Ever since he started cultivating the local cultivation method, the Yin force in his body began to compress, forming a new power. According to Lei Xingfeng's understanding, this power should not be called Lei Yin force. However, he could not find a suitable name at the moment, especially since the cultivation method did not explain it. After thinking about it, Lei Xingfeng could only give it a name himself. Great Thunderous Sound. The reason why he used this name was because his ears were constantly filled with crazy thunder. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng simply named it Great Thunderous Sound to commemorate his harvest here. The Great Thunderous Roar contained Yin power, but it was of a much higher level than Yin power. Jingzia watched as Lei Xingfeng stood up. She said, "Are we going to proceed to the next step?" Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "Yes, we have to prepare for the basic martial arts. Although there are not many methods of attack recorded, they are very good. I like them very much. I must learn them." He had always been suffering from monotonous attack methods. Other than thunder and lightning, he only had the chaos wheel. However, as his cultivation grew, the chaos wheel gradually became unsuitable for him. He urgently needed new attack methods, and the cultivation method on the wall provided several attack methods. This made Lei Xingfeng very happy. These attack methods were not the kind that paid attention to techniques or thoughts. Instead, they were a kind of direct, crushing, and extremely simple attack methods. Other than defense, there were a total of 3 attack methods. One was to rely on thunder and lightning to condense a very large berserk thunderblade, and rely on the tyrannical power of thunder and lightning to slash and fight. With the current power contained in Lei Yin's berserk thunderblade, this berserk thunderblade could be formed into a huge blade that was 3 meters long and 1 foot wide at most. Of course, if Lei Yin continued to grow, this berserk thunderblade could also grow, whether in length, volume, or attack power. At this time, to refine this berserk thunderblade, one first had to form a blade with metal and then store this blade in Lei Yin. The principle was similar to the 1,000-leaf silver. First, it had to have a solid shape, then an illusory shape. This concept was provided by the new cultivation method. The second attack method was different from the berserk thunderblade. This method required a specially refined metal ball. If it was simple, then it would be a metal ball. If it was complex, then it could be an arrowhead, a small knife, or even a triangle. It didn't matter. The principle of this attack was that when launching a thunder and lightning attack, it could be mixed with these metal balls to form a terrifying kinetic energy and strike the opponent. Its attack power was much more ferocious than the berserk thunderblade. The most powerful thing was that this kind of attack was long-range. The third method was also a method that everyone in the Great Forbidden Area knew. Jingxia explained that it was a hand attack. By creating a solid metal hand and storing it in Lei Yin, it could form a large illusory hand made of thunder and lightning. At the same time, it also depended on the power contained in the seal, which determined the size of the illusory hand. Lei Xingfeng's Lei Yin had undergone this transformation. If the metal hand was successfully refined, then his illusory hand of thunder and lightning could reach 5 meters long. According to Lei Xingfeng's strength, his illusory hand of thunder and lightning could reach up to 30 meters away. As his cultivation deepened, the distance would increase. This illusory hand of thunder and lightning could be used in many ways. Attacking was just a form. If it was controlled, well, it could even grab objects. After being controlled, the illusory hand of thunder and lightning naturally wouldn't destroy objects. There were a total of 3 attack methods, all of which Lei Xingfeng yearned for even in his dreams. If measured by the chaos wheel, he didn't know any powerful methods in the past. He had completely relied on the attribute of thunder and lightning to fight. The difference wasn't just a little bit. This was the weakness that he had groped for. The large metal blade and the large metal hand were made of almost the same materials. The refining process was also basically the same. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng was refining them at the same time. The metals needed for these 2 items were all collected locally and purified with thunder and lightning plasma. It didn't take much effort for Lei Xingfeng to make items of this level, especially with such an abnormal tool like thunder and lightning plasma. Lei Xingfeng was even more proficient. Lei Xingfeng made the large metal blade according to a normal large blade. Its model was the ghost head large blade from his previous life. This blade was very sturdy, thick, and practical. The large metal hand was made according to his own hand. Lei Xingfeng made 2 metal hands, 1 for each hand. Then he let Lei Yin absorb them. As for the metal balls, Lei Xingfeng also made a batch and directly stored them in his hidden Luan space. When he needed to use them, he just needed to throw them out. It was completed in a few days. Lei Xingfeng didn't test them. He directly returned to the mirror realm and rested for 5 days. This time, he was going to enter the platform to cultivate. His cultivation was on the right track. Jingxia looked at Lei Xingfeng a little worriedly. He had been sitting on the platform silently for 3 days. His whole body was shining with dazzling light like a statue. Lei Xingfeng didn't expect that it was the chaos wheel that was destroyed. When the endless thunder and lightning struck his body, the chaos wheel was destroyed without a trace. However, Lei Xingfeng didn't care about this at all. He began to cultivate with all his strength. The great thunderous sound grew rapidly. The feeling of being bathed in countless thunder and lightning was as if he was going to die at first. It was absolutely terrifying. However, Lei Xingfeng forcibly endured it. His strength began to grow crazily. He wasn't sure if he had reached the strength of a true monarch. However, he knew very well that when he was a 9th ring true body, his strength had stagnated. No matter how he cultivated, he couldn't increase his strength at all. Compared to his current rapid growth in strength, the 2 cultivation methods brought about completely different results. The Shift, Glory Potion, Saint Crystal, and other supplementary materials were completely useless. Lei Xingfeng didn't use them at all. He didn't want to use them because he didn't feel the existence of a bottleneck at all. He just cultivated like this. Lei Yin also rapidly transformed. The thunder and lightning here were completely different from the thunder and lightning plasma. The thunder and lightning plasma could be controlled, but the thunder and lightning here couldn't be controlled at all. Relying on his cultivation method, Lei Xingfeng actually sat on the platform for 3 days and 3 nights. The abundant energy forcibly changed Lei Xingfeng's physique. It also removed the hidden dangers left behind by his previous cultivation. This was a rebirth experience. It completely allowed Lei Xingfeng to enter a different cultivation method. After 3 days and 3 nights, Lei Xingfeng had completely changed. Jingxia shrank by the door. She didn't dare to accept this level of thunder and lightning. She quietly looked at Lei Xingfeng. As time passed, she went from being worried at the beginning to being a little worried. Although she was a little worried now, she knew that success was right in front of her. If Lei Xingfeng couldn't withstand it, he would have turned into ashes in less than 3 days and 3 nights. During this time, Lei Xingfeng also let Lei Yin out to temper himself in the thunder and lightning. When Lei Yin flew out, Lei Xingfeng could take a breather and even eat some dry food. This was also the reason why he was able to persist for so long. 3 days later, Lei Xingfeng finally stood up. Withstanding the thunder and lightning strikes, he steadily walked towards the room. When Jingxia saw Lei Xingfeng walk in, she immediately saw a shocking scene. Lei Xingfeng's eyes were actually taking in and spitting out a silver light that was more than a foot long. Both of his eyes were silver and looked incomparably cold, causing people to feel fear in their hearts. Even though she was a puppet, she still felt a chill. In addition, Lei Xingfeng's enormous thunder and lightning power made her unable to stand and continuously retreat. Lei Xingfeng curiously asked, "What's wrong?" Jingxia couldn't help but shake her head and said, "No wonder people in our era were so afraid of thunder cultivators. It's indeed a little scary." Lei Xingfeng smiled proudly. After this cultivation, he also understood that if a thunder cultivator didn't have a good cultivation method and suitable materials, then they would only be slightly better than ordinary cultivators. Originally, he had cultivated in the natural world in a thunderstorm. Compared with here, the difference between the two was simply like heaven and earth. The difference between the two was so big that it was simply like 2 different worlds. Jingxia asked, "Everything went well?" Lei Xingfeng revealed a big smile and said, "I'm going back to the mirror realm. Do you want to go back with me?" Jingxia nodded and said, "Okay." Lei Xingfeng and Jingxia appeared in the courtyard. Jean Daya and the others were all there. They almost always stayed in the courtyard, even when they were eating or resting. They all knew that Lei Xingfeng's entrance to the mirror realm was in the courtyard. The moment Lei Xingfeng appeared, a monstrous aura spread out. Everyone was frightened. Anyone who was close to Lei Xingfeng quickly retreated. The power of thunder and lightning was absolutely terrifying, great pressure, and great danger. No matter how close Lei Xingfeng was to them, the aura he was exuding now made them afraid to approach him. It was 2F* King scary. Chapter 411. Even the blackbird hovered in the air, not daring to land. It kept squawking and saying, "Squawk, I'm scared to death." "I'm scared to death," Jingxia said. "You have to restrain yourself. That way, no one can get close to you." Lei Xingfeng said in distress, "It's not that I don't want to restrain myself, but I can't. Damn it, the thunder and lightning are about to come out. Okay, everyone stay away and wait for me to recover." Someone brought a chair and put it down far away. Then he ran away. Lei Xingfeng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Am I that scary?" Jean Daya said, "It's true, it's really scary." "Afon, don't you think? I can't even stand." As he said that, he took 2 steps back. Lei Xingfeng said, helplessly, "Maybe I'll be fine after a while." Then he came to the chair and sat down. Then Everyone saw a shocking scene. The chair burned in an instant and turned into ashes in a few seconds. Lei Xingfeng was so angry that he said, "Damn it, bring me another chair." Someone brought another wooden chair. Lei Xingfeng sat down carefully. After a while, he smiled and said, "Okay, it's okay." Sure enough, there was nothing wrong with the chair. Lei Xingfeng was adapting to his power bit by bit. Gradually, he withdrew his aura. Jean Daya and the others relaxed a little. Mad Eagle said, "That's really scary. Afong, you've advanced?" Everyone's eyes showed a trace of fanaticism. As long as Lei Xingfeng advanced, their treatment and status would be completely different. Lei Xingfeng's strength meant that their faction would be strong. This was without a doubt. Even if the secret sect was harmonious, the competition between the disciples had never stopped. Lei Xingfeng shook his head and said, "I don't know if I've advanced or not, but I have a feeling that even if a perfected cultivator stood in front of me, I wouldn't be afraid." Jean Daya was puzzled. You don't know if you've advanced or not." I don't understand." Mad Eagle and Tiger Love nodded repeatedly. Of course, they couldn't understand. Jing Zia sneered and said, "He has changed his cultivation system. How can he compare?" Jean Depang came out with a group of people, each of them carrying wooden basins filled with cooked dishes. He said with a smile, "Afong, you're back for dinner? Hee, I'm ready." Jean Depang walked over to Lei Xingfeng. Before he could say anything, Lei Xingfeng turned his head and looked at him. Jean Depang screamed in fright. Jean Depang turned around and ran away. "You scared me to death." Jean Depang shouted. Jean Daya was right next to him. He grabbed Jean Depang and dragged him back. "Why are you running?" The black bird circled in the air, chirping happily. Finally, there was a guy who was scared out of his wits just like it was. The black bird immediately calmed down. Jean Depang was really scared to death because he saw Lei Xingfeng's eyes. They were two silver eyes, and the cold feeling almost made him collapse. Any cultivator had an intuition of danger. Jean Depang almost peed himself when he saw the pair of eyes and the extreme danger brought by the lightning. Jean Depang was so scared that he started babbling nonsense. This isn't a phone. So scary. You scared me to death." Jean Daya slapped him directly and scolded, "Grow up. That's a phone. He just came back from cultivation. Don't worry." Mad Eagle said with a smile, "Old Jean, don't scold the fatty. You were also scared when you saw a phone." Only then did Jean Daya let go and said, "Okay, a phone is much better now. Don't be scared to death when you first came in." The black bird circled in the air dozens of times. It was a little impatient. "The bird is falling, caw." It gathered its courage, cried out loudly, and fell. Lei Xingfeng operated the thunderous roar with all his strength. Finally, all the energy returned to his body. At this moment, the black bird landed. The black bird was more sensitive. It could feel the changes in Lei Xingfeng the most. After landing on Lei Xingfeng's shoulder, it obviously relaxed. It could feel that the energy had disappeared. It combed Lei Xingfeng's hair and said, "Next time, bring the bird with you." Lei Xingfeng said, "You're not afraid of danger anymore?" The black bird said, "Seeing that Master's cultivation has increased greatly, this bird is confident." It flattered Lei Xingfeng a little. Jingzia sneered and said, "If you were there when your master was cultivating, I can tell you for sure, stupid bird, you are dead." The black bird said, "I don't even care about you." Jingzia snorted and didn't continue. She regretted reminding him. Wasn't it better to let this damn bird go to the platform? It would be better if it was directly struck by lightning. Lei Xingfeng said, "Bird Bud, wait a little longer. When I finish cultivating, I will take you to see it. If you go now, you will be courting death. Jingzia couldn't help but say, take it with you, it will be better to be struck by lightning. The blackbird said, I don't even care about you. Well, Master said not to go, so I won't go. The blackbird was not stupid. The words of Lei Xingfeng and Jingzia made it sure that the place Lei Xingfeng went was indeed very dangerous. Jingzia said sarcastically, what a good-for-nothing stupid bird. The blackbird still said the same thing, I don't even care about you. Of course, this sentence had become the blackbird's answer. As long as it didn't want to respond, it would say, I don't even care about you. People who heard it for the first time would definitely be choked, speechless. Jingzia had long been used to it. She raised her head and didn't even look at the blackbird. Jean Dia lowered his head and pondered. He said, another set of cultivation systems. But I feel that no matter how many changes there are, it will still be the same. There will always be something to compare. Oh, what should I compare it with? Mad Eagle said casually, that's simple. As long as you can control the secret door, it means that you have stepped into the realm of Supreme. Jean Dia slapped his thigh and said, yes, that's right. When Lei Xingfeng heard the conversation between the two, his eyes lit up, and he said happily, yes, as long as I can control the secret door of the mirror realm, it means that I have the strength of a Supreme. As for whether it is an advancement of the original system or not, it doesn't matter. Jean Dia said, then let's try it. Lei Xingfeng said with a smile, wait a minute. I've been hungry for several days. It's more important to eat first. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. They all knew that Lei Xingfeng was a foodie. Under the tireless training of Jean Depan, the whole Lei Xingfeng group showed signs of developing into foodies. Lei Xingfeng felt full without eating much, which was absolutely impossible before. After eating 7 or 8 kilograms of meat and drinking a few large glasses of fishman wine, Lei Xingfeng was stunned. He said, strange, I'm full. Jean Depan said with a smile, a Feng, don't joke. This is not enough to fill the gap between my teeth. I've already snorted it. Jean Dia, Mad Eagle, Tiger Love, and the others all looked puzzled. The difference between his appetite and before was too big, wasn't it? Jingzia sneered and said, ignorant. Why would a person who can directly absorb energy from the air care about the little harvest of food? A Feng doesn't need to rely on food to obtain energy. Everyone immediately understood that it was not a matter of appetite, but that Lei Xingfeng had been reborn. Everyone had doubts in their hearts. They didn't know what level Lei Xingfeng had reached. In fact, even Lei Xingfeng himself didn't know, because this was another system of cultivation. Although the cultivation of the secret door was derived from this system, after many years it had long become specious, and the gap between the two was getting wider and wider. Lei Xingfeng sighed. What a foodie was most afraid of was having a small appetite. It was simply too cruel. He touched his head and said, in the future, I will only eat the appetizers. Alas, it's impossible for everything to go well. Jean Depan comforted him. No problem. I will prepare more exquisite and delicious dishes. Everyone was amused. Jean Dia said, it's not a big deal to eat less. At least you can eat more than ordinary people. Lei Xingfeng said, okay, I'm going to rest. There were many benefits to having the mirror realm, but the most practical one was that he could come back and rest at any time. This was especially important for Lei Xingfeng. Everything was good in the magnetic storm mountain, but the constant rumbling of thunder was very stressful. With the mirror realm, Lei Xingfeng could recover quickly and not become restless. In fact, Lei Xingfeng had long noticed that his temper would become very bad if he stayed in the magnetic storm mountain for a long time, which was very detrimental to his cultivation. It was very difficult for a restless person to stay calm which would cause a series of problems during cultivation. Therefore, Lei Xingfeng insisted on coming back to rest and recover. When he came back, he would talk to everyone, eat some food, and then sleep. No matter what kind of anxiety he had, it would disappear. However, with the growth of his cultivation, not only did he eat less, but he also slept less. After sleeping for only one day, Lei Xingfeng was completely recovered. He returned to the magnetic storm mountain in high spirits. Standing at the door and looking at the violent thunder on the platform, Lei Xingfeng sighed with emotion. I really can't imagine who would be so generous to use such a big restriction formation to restrain such thunder and lightning. He was very impressed. This was not the means of a human at all. It should be the means of a god. Looking out from the door, all he could see was dazzling lightning and shocking thunderclaps. 2 continuous explosions. If it was an ordinary person, he would probably be shocked to death. Even if it was a cultivator, perhaps only a perfected person could barely resist. Those Wan Luan and mill wheel masters could not enter at all. Not to mention being struck by lightning, the power of the thunder and lightning alone was enough to make their minds scattered. Even if they did not die, they would be half dead. But this place was a treasure for Lei Xingfeng, an unparalleled treasure for cultivation. Jingzia shrank back. Although she was strong, she could not avoid this level of thunder and lightning. She could not resist a few attacks at all. Lei Xingfeng said, "This time, I need to temper my weapon on the platform." Jingzia said, "Be careful." Lei Xingfeng nodded and walked out slowly. In an instant, a thunder and lightning struck down. Lei Xingfeng did not block it. The thunder and lightning struck Lei Xingfeng fiercely. Suddenly, Lei Xingfeng's whole body shone brightly. His body had gradually gotten used to this level of thunder and lightning. It should be known that some time ago, he had been struck by thunder and lightning for 3 whole days. Every few seconds, a bolt of lightning would strike down, followed by the sound of thunder that could kill people. Chapter 412. Lei Xingfeng went to the center of the platform and sat down cross-legged. He first enjoyed the baptism of dozens of lightning bolts. That's right, he was enjoying the lightning bolts. Now that the lightning bolts hit him, it was to improve his cultivation. His body had completely adapted to the lightning. That kind of numbing feeling made him very comfortable. The only thing that made him a little uncomfortable was the sound of the thunder. It was really too loud. Lei Yin took out the refined metal saber blank. Lei Xingfeng had already placed a simple restriction on it. Of course, this restriction was recorded on the wall. Although it was very simple, Lei Xingfeng didn't understand its mysteries at all. He was completely copying it. Fortunately, when he was making it, he was very careful. Even if he copied it, it was very accurate. Relying on this restriction, Lei Yin was able to collect the saber blank. This was only the first step. The most important step was to release the saber blank after Lei Yin collected it and temper it in the lightning. The saber blank was 1 meter long and had no handle. It was shaped like a ghost head saber. The front end was wide, and the back end was narrow. It flickered with a silver light as if it was made of mercury. When the lightning struck it, countless sparks could be seen flying in all directions. Saber, seal, and human. The 3 relied on the combination of lightning to influence and communicate with each other. After 2 hours, Lei Xingfeng pushed Lei Yin up and reached out to grab the saber blank. In addition to the traces of the restriction, there were also traces of lightning on the saber blank. If the restriction was like the arteries and veins of the human body, then the traces left by the lightning were the capillaries that connected the meridians. On the silver saber body, there were a few twisted golden lines. Countless tiny purple marks spread out, looking very strange. according to the cultivation method recorded on the wall, this level of saber blank was considered a preliminary success. Of course, when attacking, the saber blank would not be released to fight. Instead, it would be an illusory thunder saber. Its handle was Lei Xingfeng's hand. The saber extended from Lei Xingfeng's arm was the unique thunder saber. After collecting the saber blank, Lei Xingfeng released 2 metal hands. The metal hands were the same size as Lei Xingfeng's hands. Back then, his hands had been used to make the mold. Even the fingerprints on his hands were exactly the same. This pair of metal hands also had a simple restriction. They were released to be tempered by lightning. It was the same process as the saber blank. This time, Lei Xingfeng's hands, seal, and human relied on lightning to combine. After more than 2 hours, Lei Xingfeng took them back for inspection. The pair of silver metal hands, after being tempered by lightning, were smaller than Lei Xingfeng's hands. They looked very delicate. Whether it was the saber blank of the thunder saber or the metal hands, they were Lei Xingfeng's main weapons in the future. Different from the cultivation method of the secret sect, these weapons could be improved with Lei Xingfeng's cultivation. In other words, these weapons could be upgraded automatically. Just like Lei Yin, as time passed, and Lei Xingfeng persevered in cultivation, Lei Yin could continue to grow stronger. After the initial tempering of the 2 weapons, Lei Xingfeng relaxed a little. Having weapons meant that Lei Xingfeng's attack power would increase. He would not be like before. Once he fought, he would either use the violent wheel or a bolt of lightning. Not only were his attacks monotonous, but the attack effect was also not very good. Especially when he was a 9th ring sage, the lack of attack methods made him quite depressed. After the 2 carefully crafted weapons passed, Lei Xingfeng was in a very good mood. At this point, he had completed more than half of the cultivation method recorded on the wall. The only thing left was to accumulate his cultivation. This required him to cultivate on the platform for a period of time. Cultivation was a process of accumulation. Of course, it was a little different in the magnetic storm mountain. Due to the large amount of lightning as nourishment, Lei Xingfeng's cultivation could advance by leaps and bounds. This was also the terrifying part of the lightning attribute. Their advancement could not be predicted by common sense. After staying in the magnetic storm mountain range for 4 months, Lei Xingfeng's strength had reached a level that even he himself was not clear about. In any case, he had completely controlled the mirror realm and the secret door of the mirror realm. Lei Xingfeng knew very well that he had only discovered the tip of the iceberg regarding the magnetic storm mountain range. There should be more secrets in the magnetic storm mountain range. However, he could no longer stay here to cultivate. He had to go back. In the room next to the cultivation platform, Lei Xingfeng carefully set this place as his first entry point for the secret door. This meant that as long as he entered outer space, he could enter this room at any time and cultivate on the platform at any time. A few days before leaving, Lei Xingfeng collected all the lightning plasma in the pool. The pool did not look small, but there was not much lightning plasma. The pool was quite shallow. He did not know that the lightning plasma had been accumulated over countless years. There were more than 100 bottles of lightning plasma. Each bottle was about a foot tall and half a foot in diameter. These bottles took Lei Xingfeng a lot of time to make. Since Lei Xingfeng had only just grasped the secret door, he had to go personally to obtain the coordinates. Therefore, he could not directly open the secret door and enter the camp. He had to walk back. On his way back, Lei Xingfeng saw Gao Yi again. When Gao Yi saw Lei Xingfeng, he was surprised. "Kid, you're actually still alive?" Lei Xingfeng laughed. "Are you disappointed?" Gao Yi carefully sized up Lei Xingfeng. After a while, he said doubtfully, "Good fellow, why can't I see your depth?" Lei Xingfeng's heart moved. He was eager to give it a try. Why don't we try a fight? Gao Yi said, You've advanced to true monarch? That's not right. What a strange feeling. He felt a trace of threat, which made him feel incredulous. Previously, he did not dare to enter the magnetic storm mountain range. At that time, Lei Xingfeng was only a ninth ring sage. He was very clear about this. However, after a trip to the magnetic storm mountain range, he could not understand Lei Xingfeng at all. Lei Xingfeng's side was still the same people: Jean Daya, Mad Eagle, Tiger Love, Jingxia, Blackbird, and the 4 gold gray puppets. It was a big group. Jingxia said, We'll know after we fight. Jean Daya, Tiger Love, and Mad Eagle all showed a trace of nervousness. What a joke! The opponent was not a true monarch, but a heaven monarch. Although he was seriously injured, after so many days of recuperation, he should have completely recovered. How could they fight a heaven monarch? Gao Yi looked at Lei Xingfeng thoughtfully. He suddenly smiled and said, It's good to give it a try. I also want to see what benefits you have gained in the magnetic storm mountain range. Lei Xingfeng immediately smiled. He really wanted to find someone to fight, but whether it was Jingxia, Jean Daya, or the others, they were not suitable opponents. Now that there was a great expert like Gao Yi, Lei Xingfeng believed that he could attack without restraint. The opponent was a heaven monarch expert, the same level as the founder. He believed that if he attacked with all his strength, the opponent should be able to withstand it. Gao Yi said, All right, all of you back off. Let us try. Jingxia did not say anything else. She turned and ran. Jean Daya and the others also ran away. The 4 gold gray puppets also left. Blackbird said, Is Bird going to leave? Lei Xingfeng said, Nonsense. If you want to stay, I won't object. But can you withstand the impact? Blackbird immediately spread its wings and flew away. It said, Bird will watch the show. It flew away. It was not so stupid to stay in the same place. Gao Yi said, Let's stay away from them. As he spoke, he walked in the opposite direction. Lei Xingfeng followed. This was a grassy plain. There were many trees in the distance. The terrain was flat, and it was a very suitable place for battle. Gao Yi stopped and said, There are no forbidden areas in this area, so you can fly. Of course, be safe and don't fly too high. And let's limit our battle to the ground as much as possible. Lei Xingfeng agreed and said, I am a junior. He, senior. Can I attack to my heart's content? Gao Yi could not help but laugh. We haven't even fought, and you are already taking advantage of us. Lei Xingfeng said, This is not taking advantage of us. Senior, I have no idea if I can block your attack. Gao Yi thought for a moment and said, All right, you come first. Let me see what is going on. He also wanted to see how powerful Lei Xingfeng's attack was. He was also curious about lightning attribute cultivators. Lei Xingfeng secretly laughed. To be able to make the first move was a great advantage. In the end, it was because Gao Yi was strong that he dared to agree to such an absurd request. Gao Yi said, Come, let me see how strong you are. His body began to surge with a faint white light, and a wave of cold air surged out. It was actually the rarely seen ice attribute. Lei Xingfeng did not release Lei Yin, but a faint shadow of 1,000 leaves silver appeared around his body, flickering in and out of existence. Suddenly, arcs of electricity surged from his right arm. The silver light followed his arm and extended forward. A huge sword with a ghost head of lightning appeared. In a flash, it had already reached 2 meters long. Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, Coming! He suddenly pounced. Gao Ye's pupils rapidly contracted. He suddenly felt a great threat. Kalala! Boom! That's right, it was the explosion after the lightning. When Lei Xingfeng brandished his sword and chopped down, A bolt of lightning appeared in the trajectory of the sword, emitting a glaring brilliance. At the same time, the sound of thunder that shook the heavens exploded and struck directly at Gao Yi. There was no sound of breaking air, only the sound of lightning piercing through the air. This was something that Lei Xingfeng had never heard before. Even Lei Xingfeng was secretly shocked by the sound of thunder. Gao Yi suddenly felt that something was wrong because the sound of thunder was simply too shocking. It made his heart palpitate and his spirit waver. He was actually a bit unable to control himself. In an instant, he did not dare to block. His figure suddenly merged into the air, and the sword completely cut through the air and chopped down on the ground. Boom! A crack that was 7 to 8 meters long appeared on the ground. The weeds on the ground immediately burst into flames, burning in a line. Gao Yi had not dodged far, only 5 to 6 meters away. He appeared from the side. It wasn't that he didn't want to dodge further, but that he didn't have time. The speed of lightning was the fastest. With his experience, he could not help but dodge in the instant that he felt something was wrong. This was an instinct that he had tempered thousands of times. He simply did it without thinking. When Lei Xingfeng saw Gao Yi appear, he pounced over without hesitation. He raised the sword in his hand again and shouted, "Don't dodge, let's fight!" Chapter 413. A huge hammer suddenly appeared in Gao Yi's hand. This hammer was quite unique. It looked like a waist drum with 2 big ends and a small middle and a thick handle. Gao Yi originally didn't plan on using a weapon, even if he couldn't see through Lei Xingfeng. When Lei Xingfeng entered the magnetic storm mountain range, he was only a 9th ring sage. He naturally thought that even if Lei Xingfeng became stronger, he would only have the strength of a true monarch. He didn't take it to heart, which was why he made a fool of himself. Now, Gao Yi didn't think that Lei Xingfeng only had the strength of a true monarch. In his opinion, Lei Xingfeng's saber that could make thunderous sounds was quite abnormal. He didn't have the confidence to block it with his bare hands, which was why he took out his weapon. When the huge hammer appeared, large chunks of ice appeared on it. Lei Xingfeng saw it clearly. When the huge hammer appeared, it doubled in size. Its surface was sparkling and translucent, and a chill spread out. Lei Xingfeng shouted, "Good!" He had already closed in on Gao Yi and fiercely chopped down with his saber. This time, Gao Yi didn't dodge. If he dodged again, he would be looked down upon. With the pride of a heavenly monarch, he couldn't afford to lose face. Just now, he dodged involuntarily. This time, he took out his weapon. He had the confidence to fight head-on with Lei Xingfeng. Ka-la-la! Boom! Another saber chopped down. Gao Yi didn't show any weakness. He swung the huge hammer and fiercely smashed it. A ray of white light and a ray of silver light collided. It actually set off a shockwave. In an instant, the ice on the huge hammer was completely shattered. Gao Yi retreated continuously. Lei Xingfeng wasn't having a good time either. The illusory lightning in his hand instantly collapsed. He also couldn't stand and kept retreating. Both of their bodies emitted light. This was the defense of the seal, which protected the body from harm. After retreating a dozen steps, Gao Yi suddenly shouted, "Attack!" A giant ice hand appeared out of thin air and instantly expanded to 5 meters in size. It slammed down towards Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng was in the middle of recovering his thunderblade. He now realized that once the illusory thunderblade exceeded a certain amount of power, it would immediately collapse. Fortunately, it was only an illusory thunderblade, and the real thunderblade was not affected. So he could quickly condense another illusory lightning. Before he could finish condensing it, he saw a huge palm slapping down from above, no different from swatting a fly. This giant hand was not completely solid. It only had the vague shape of a hand, and a large amount of white mist was coming out of it. When it slapped down, it actually made a sound of breaking through the air. One of Lei Xingfeng's hands was holding a half-collapsed thunderblade, while the other hand was empty. He roared and suddenly waved his left hand, and a similar illusory hand flew out. The illusory hand of lightning was surrounded by countless lightning bolts and leaping electric arcs. This illusory hand was only 3 meters long, which was clearly smaller than Gao Ye's 5-meter-long ice hand. However, this hand of lightning had a special characteristic that Gao Yi did not have, and that was that it was more solid, and its might was even greater. When it attacked, it brought out the rumbling sound of thunder. The two large hands directly collided. Boom! Electric currents and ice fragments flew everywhere, and electric arcs jumped randomly. A large amount of mist spread out along with the collapse of Gao Ye's illusory hand. Taking this opportunity, Lei Xingfeng recondensed his thunder blade. This was the benefit of having an inheritance. No matter how many times this illusory thunder blade and illusory hand collapsed, it would not affect Lei Xingfeng's battle. As long as he still had the great, thunderous sound in his body, and as long as Lei Yin was still filled with energy, he would not lack weapons. Gao Yi was overwhelmed with shock and said, "Good." He never thought that Lei Xingfeng would be so strong. Lei Xingfeng waved his illusory thunder blade and roared again. Gao Yi flashed and appeared a few dozen meters away. He shouted, all right, there is no need to continue." Lei Xingfeng raised his thunder blade and asked with doubt, "Why?" Gao Yi slowly walked over and said, "There is no meaning in continuing the competition. You are very strong, but every heaven monarch has their own trump card. Once they use it, there will be casualties. We don't have any enmity, and you even saved my life. There is no need to fight to the death." Lei Xingfeng had no choice but to disperse his illusory thunder blade. He said, "All right." As he spoke, there was a whistling sound, and Jean Daya and the others immediately ran back. This battle was not considered intense, and it was very short. The area affected was not big, but Lei Xingfeng clearly knew that he could withstand the attack of a heaven monarch, which meant that he had the strength of a heaven monarch. When facing a heaven monarch, he could already withstand it. Even if he couldn't win, he could definitely escape. This made him very happy. Gao Yi also understood that if he went all out, Lei Xingfeng might not be able to withstand it. However, from the clues during the confrontation, Lei Xingfeng's strength was also not to be underestimated. Jean Daya asked, "A foam, how is it?" They were a group of people from afar, and it was very difficult to get the result, especially when the two exchanged moves very quickly and ended in just a few moves. Of course, they wouldn't be able to guess the result. After reaching a certain level, one could basically guess the opponent's strength as long as they came into contact with each other. Of course, the secret skills didn't count, as some of the secret skills were used to challenge people of a higher level. They were the secrets of each clan and wouldn't be used easily unless it was a matter of life and death. If they could use it, they would use the commonly used methods. Just like how Lei Xingfeng still had a move that he hadn't tried yet. It didn't mean that he didn't have the strength to fight. Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, "Not bad. At least I can exchange one move with Senior." He was already extremely excited. What a joke! To be able to exchange moves with a heaven monarch gave him a great sense of accomplishment. Even if he couldn't win, he would be satisfied. He had only cultivated for a short period of time, and he was already able to exchange moves with a heaven monarch. This result wasn't small. Jean Daya and the others revealed a trace of shock. What kind of concept was it to exchange moves with a heaven monarch? Everyone was very clear that even if they couldn't win, they would be on equal footing. The black bird landed on Lei Xingfeng's shoulder and said fawningly, "Congratulations, congratulations. This bird is here to congratulate you." As an upright puppet, Jing Zia looked down on the black bird. According to her thoughts, if she caught the black bird in a place where no one was around, she would break its neck. Then she would be completely at peace. Therefore, she stared at the black bird with bad intentions. Gao Yi said, "It seems like you have gained a lot in the magnetic storm mountain range." Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, "It's not bad, hee." It wasn't just not bad. Everyone could see the unconcealable joy on Lei Xingfeng's face. The harvest this time was really great. With the crazy growth of his strength, Lei Xingfeng's status would also soar. Therefore, the status of his subordinates would also rise. No one would be unhappy. Gao Yi hesitated and said, "Brother, I have an idea. I don't know if you are willing to listen." Lei Xingfeng's heart was moved. He smiled and said, "Uncle, just say it." No matter what, Gao Yi was definitely older than Ai Yi. Calling him uncle was already an advantage. Ai Yi wouldn't call him brother. After all, the other party was a Heaven Monarch Realm senior expert. Gao Yi said, "I am tired of being outside. I will follow you in the future. How about it?" Lei Xingfeng instantly opened his mouth. In fact, he had a vague guess in his heart, but he didn't expect to still be ecstatic after Gao Yi said it. This was a Heaven Monarch, and one that had lived in the extraterritorial starry sky for a long time. His strength was definitely not to be underestimated. He actually wanted to follow him. Gao Yi said, "Why? Are you not willing?" Lei Xingfeng hurriedly said, "I am willing. Of course I am willing. Welcome, Uncle Gao." Jean Dia and the others also came forward to welcome and respectfully addressed him as senior. Gao Yi smiled and said, "No matter what, you saved my life. Hee, and I also think highly of your potential." Thinking highly of Lei Xingfeng's potential was what he valued the most. Otherwise, he wouldn't take the initiative to ask to join. Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "Then, Uncle Gao, we will be a family in the future." Gao Ye's face revealed a trace of a smile and said, "All right, we will be a family in the future." Lei Xingfeng clapped and said, "In order to welcome Uncle Gao, we will hold a celebration. Everyone come over." Everyone gathered, and Gao Yi asked curiously, "What is it?" Before he could understand, the scenery in front of him suddenly changed. In an instant, he appeared in Lei Xingfeng's courtyard. Gao Yi was shocked and said, "This is—" Lei Xingfeng had already completely controlled the mirror world. Furthermore, his strength had skyrocketed. He wasn't afraid of others snatching the mirror world. He smiled and said, "This is our home. Welcome, Uncle Gao." Gao Yi had already reacted and said, "Mirror world? Is this the legendary mirror world?" Lei Xingfeng smiled and said, "That's right, this is the mirror world." Gao Yi said strangely, "Wow, this is great. Do you know what the mirror world means?" Jean Dia asked curiously, "What does it mean?" Gao Yi said, "It means that restrictions are useless." Ha! With the mirror world, restrictions are useless. This means that the dangers of entering the forbidden area will be greatly reduced. Even if you encounter danger, you can escape immediately. Lei Xingfeng nodded and said, "I know this." Gao Yi said, "You might not know, but you should be careful. Even Dao monarchs will be tempted by the mirror world." Jean Dia said, "Dao monarchs? Will Dao monarchs snatch it?" Gao Yi said, "This is different from the secret treasure space. It is fixed. Making a change in the passage requires countless materials and manpower. But the mirror world is mobile, and it also has a weakness. Once the person who controls it dies, the mirror world will appear. This means that this thing can be snatched. Lei Xingfeng said, "It's impossible to snatch it now." Gao Yi said, "Yes, it's very difficult. You can leave at any time. Even Dao monarchs can't stop you." Once the secret door of the mirror world was controlled by Exine Feng, it would become a portable killing machine that could be brought anywhere, entering from a place and leaving from a place. No one would be able to stop the owner of the mirror world from escaping. This was also why Exine Feng dared to bring Gao Yi into the mirror world. Even if his strength was weaker than Gao Ye's, it was enough to last for a period of time, and with this period of time, he had countless ways to leave. Gao Yi said, "Still be careful. Try not to expose yourself." Lei Xingfeng said, "I know. I was very careful before. Now that I control the secret door, it's much safer. Of course, I will still be very careful." Chapter 414. Gao Yi said, "I no longer have any ambitions. Otherwise, I would be tempted too." Lei Xingfeng then introduced Gao Yi to his family. No one dared to be disrespectful to a heavenly monarch. They all gave Gao Yi great respect. Gao Yi joined Lei Xingfeng's faction. Due to his strength, he didn't need to manage anything. His status was very high, similar to that of a guest. Even if Lei Xingfeng had something to do, he could only discuss it with him. He couldn't order him to do it. Another person. This was the first time Lei Xingfeng had a super expert. Lei Xingfeng was very happy. He said, "Fatty, old fatty, prepare a feast and invite our senior Gao Yi to taste your superb cooking." Jean Depang went in high spirits. This kind of mission was his favorite. This meal left Gao Yi dumbstruck. He never knew that food could be so meticulous and delicious. Based on his habits, as long as he could fill his stomach, he would be fine. He never cared about the taste. This meal thoroughly conquered him, and he became closer to Jean Depang than to other people. Lei Xingfeng said while eating, "Uncle Gao, you've lived here for so long. How many experts have you seen here?" Gao Yi said, "At least a few dozen." Lei Xingfeng said in surprise, "That many? A few dozen? Are they all true monarch experts?" Gao Yi said, "What's so strange about that? I've lived here for so many years, and I only see one person every few years. We talk for a while, and then part. Of course, there are some eccentricities. They fight whenever they meet. I've seen a few of them. They're basically crazy and won't live for long." Lei Xingfeng said again, "When you met Uncle Gao, why were you so heavily injured?" He didn't ask back then because it was taboo, now that they were on the same side. He couldn't help but ask. Gao Yi didn't care. Gao Yi did not mind, and said, "Of course I was beaten up by someone. I was unlucky to have met a bastard who pestered me and insisted on a duel. In the end, this bastard directly attacked me. I was careless and was seriously injured. I could only escape. This bastard chased me for half a year and finally managed to shake him off, but I couldn't hold on any longer. I had long since used up all my medicines, so I could only wait for death. I could only wait." Jean Depang asked curiously, "Was that person a Dao monarch?" Gao Yi shook his head. "No, he was a peak heavenly monarch. He was stronger than me. Actually, if I was careful, even if I couldn't win, I could escape." Lei Xingfeng said, "It's good that he wasn't a Dao monarch." Gao Yi said, "Dao monarch? Hee, if it was a Dao monarch, I wouldn't be able to survive. A Dao monarch is too strong. He's not someone I can fight against. It would be hard to even escape unless I have the mirror realm." The mirror realm was a life-saving treasure, especially when meeting a powerful expert. Unless the opponent was so strong that he could kill Lei Xingfeng with a single slap, there was nothing he could do to him. Now, it was extremely difficult to kill Lei Xingfeng. Not only was he strong, but he had Gao Yi, the crystal doll, and the gold-grade puppet by his side. It was almost impossible to kill him. Jean Dia said, that person didn't appear after that. Gao Yi said, nonsense. If that person appeared, I would be finished. However, I won't let him go. I'm almost a peak heavenly monarch. If not for my injuries, I would have reached this level long ago. There was a trace of unwillingness in his voice. Lei Xingfeng laughed and said, if you meet that person again, hee, Uncle Gao, you won't be alone. Gao Yi obviously understood what Lei Xingfeng meant. Lei Xingfeng might not be able to defeat that person, but he already had the ability to restrain that person. With Gao Yi, if that person appeared, the consequences would be dire. Jean Dia said, yes, no matter how strong that person is, he can't beat a group of people. Gao Yi said, a group of people? That depends on what kind of people they are. You guys are still too weak. Without the strength of a true monarch, you have no foothold in front of a heavenly monarch. You don't even need to fight. It will be difficult for you to perform normally. The difference is too big. Jean Dia, Tiger Love, and Mad Eagle were all silent. They knew that Gao Yi was telling the truth, but the three of them were still unwilling to accept it. It wasn't that they didn't work hard, but because of their skills and talent, it was difficult for them to improve. As Lei Xingfeng's cultivation increased rapidly, they were gradually falling behind. Lei Xingfeng said, in the forbidden area, anything is possible. Perhaps we can find a suitable cultivation skill. Who knows if we can improve further? Gao Yi shook his head slightly. Some things couldn't be forced, especially a 9th ring sage like this. His potential had basically been exhausted. This was no longer something that could be solved by cultivation skills. Jean Dia laughed and said, Afong, there's no need to comfort us. We're already very satisfied that we've reached this level. In reality, he couldn't go on any longer. It wasn't just his cultivation, but also his life force. Now, he was basically relying on yin rings to support himself. Every year, he used up a lot of yin rings. It was only from Lei Xingfeng that he could get so many yin rings and some medicines that were in high demand. Once he lost these, he wouldn't be able to live for more than a few years. Gao Yi said calmly, a group will always have new and old members. If you want to grow stronger, you have to get rid of the old and take in the new. This is the only way to grow stronger. Lei Xingfeng sighed. He didn't have much ambition. His only goal after coming to this world was to live a comfortable life and let his family live a stable life. But after entering the hidden sect, he had no choice but to fight. Not only did he have to be strong, but he also had to make his subordinates strong. This was no longer a personal problem, but a problem for the survival of his bloodline. This responsibility was slowly being placed on his head. He couldn't refuse it, nor could he. Jean Dia agreed. That's right. Afong succeeded in his cultivation this time. He should be different when he goes back. Lei Xingfeng had already surpassed the level of a 9th ring sage. It was just that his cultivation method was different, which made him seem even more mysterious. Just like how Gao Yi couldn't tell how strong Lei Xingfeng was, no one else could tell how strong Lei Xingfeng was. Gao Yi said, Afong, where do you plan to go? I'm curious. How did you get here? Lei Xingfeng said, back to the camp. Our hidden sect has set up a camp here. There are many people here. Gao Yi was shocked. Since when did the hidden sect become so strong? They can actually set up a camp in outer space. As far as he knew, a hidden door needed countless yin rings to enter the outer space. Normally, a hidden door would only allow 1 or 2 people to enter. But if they built a camp, that meant a group of people would come. How was that possible? Lei Xingfeng said, the hidden sect has set up a camp on the Dawn continent as a springboard. It will be very close to outer space. Gao Yi was shocked. They actually found a continent like this. Interesting. Based on what you said, This place will soon become lively. Lei Xingfeng shook his head. Not necessarily. The hidden sect's main target is the Dawn continent. They already have a base there. Many hidden sects have set up camps there. Gao Yi said, You plan to go to the Dawn continent? Lei Xingfeng smiled. I have the Mirror Realm. As long as I know the location, it's easy to go anywhere. Gao Yi immediately laughed and said, This plaything is indeed very good. It's a legendary treasure. I really don't know how you got it. Lei Xingfeng said, It's just luck. After we finish eating, we'll hurry on our way. He had no choice. He didn't have the coordinates of the camp, so he couldn't use the Mirror Realm's secret door to return to the camp. He had to walk. Of course, he could use Gao Ye's secret door to save a lot of time. Very quickly, everyone finished their meal. Xian Feng brought Gao Yi, Jin Dia, Jingxia, and Blackbird with him again. As for the 4 gold level mannequins, he left them in the mirror world. He realized that he was already strong enough. Through Gao Ye's secret door, Lei Xingfeng and the others arrived at the place where they first met Gao Yi. Then they walked towards the camp, which was very close. After a long journey, Lei Xingfeng and the others finally arrived at the Stone Forest camp. After entering the camp, Lei Xingfeng realized that it was very lively. There were many people. Jin Dia immediately pulled someone aside and asked, Why are there so many people in the camp? That person said, We all moved here from the Dawn continent. Lei Xingfeng was surprised. What do you mean? That person had seen Lei Xingfeng before and knew that he was a direct disciple. He stepped forward and saluted. The camp at the Dawn continent was destroyed, so we all moved here. Lei Xingfeng was stunned. This news was too shocking. In other words, the Dawn continent's secret door had been defeated. Lei Xingfeng said, Everyone moved here. Then the camp at the Dawn continent was abandoned. That person nodded. It was temporarily abandoned. All the camps were moved away. Most of them moved into outer space, and a few returned to their original places. Lei Xingfeng said, So that's how it is. I'll go find Master first. That person saluted and left. Lei Xingfeng quickly found Master Guqi's residence and walked in with a group of people. Guqi, Tanya, Feng Qinzong, Xian Zhaoluan, Qi Meiyun, and Teng Yuan were all present. Lei Xingfeng walked in with Gao Yi. As for Jin Dia, Mad Eagle, Tiger Love, and Jingxia, they waited outside. The reason they brought Gao Yi in was because Gao Ye's position was too high. They had to report it to Master first. Lei Xingfeng walked in and said, Master, Master's wife, Junior Marshal Uncle, you're all here. I'm back. Guqi saw Lei Xingfeng come in and was relieved. He had been looking for Lei Xingfeng for a long time, but couldn't find him. He said, Why did you go out for so long? Lei Xingfeng smiled. Master, I didn't go out for too long. All right. Master, this is Senior Gao Yi. He'll be my guest elder from now on. Guqi had already noticed Gao Yi. What surprised him was that he couldn't see through his cultivation. He stood up and said, Hello, my disciple didn't give you any trouble, right? Gao Yi stared at Guqi. He found that Guqi was a peak true monarch. He was slightly stunned. This disciple was stronger than Master. He felt strange. He nodded slightly. Gao Yi, heavenly monarch, you're too polite. A Feng is my savior. There was an uproar. Gao, you was a heavenly monarch. This was too ridiculous. However, Gao Yi had already explained why he followed Lei Xingfeng. Lei Xingfeng was his savior. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.